evening and welcome to the July 9th, 2019 Planning and Zoning Commissioners meeting this evening. If we can have roll call, Shannon, please.
Messina?
Here?
Fleming? Here. Ingalls?
Here.
Lutrip?
Here.
Mandel?
Here.
Rumpler?
Here.
Ward?
Here.
Okay, if you can join me, stand for the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I need a motion and approval for May 28th workshop minutes, please.
I'd move that we approve the May 28th workshop minutes.
I have a motion to approve. Need a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The June 11th, 2019 Planning Commission meetings. I need approval for those minutes, please.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion, second.
I'll second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. At this time, public comments can be heard for anything that isn't on the agenda for this evening. If anyone wishes to speak, come on up. Okay, no one wishes to speak. Commissioner comments at this time? I'll just make a comment. I went to the Parking Commission's meeting this afternoon, and I just want to tell everyone that if you get on the cdaid.org/parking, there's a whole bunch of information on their maps, where you can park, questions and answers for a lot of the questions that have come up since the new rules and regulations have been applied for parking. So it's a great website to go check it out. And also, there is an app that you can actually pay for your parking, extend your parking if you are someplace else and you're there longer than you thought you were going to be. And that app is Call to Park. So I invite you all to check that out, and I believe that will answer a lot of questions about how great our city is for parking in this town. Any other comments? No? Okay. Staff comments, Hillary?
All right, good evening, Commissioners. A few comments for you. So the first one is about the health corridor. So we had Chairman Messina was there last night. So there's 3 workshops this week. They're design workshops. They're taking place at North Idaho College, and of course this one conflicts, but for those of you at home or those of you in the audience that aren't going to stay the full meeting, we really would like some additional public input. So tonight is the second night. It's a multi-day charrette, and so they're rolling out 2 new designs tonight or this evening that are based on the public feedback on the first 4 designs. And so it's 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. this evening, North Idaho College Student Union, second floor, and tomorrow is from 5 to 7, same location. So really want public input and some great feedback so that we can see what the community would like to see for that area. And one of the things that came up last night too was some of the neighbors were concerned, so just wanted to make sure people understand part of the plan is to help make the neighborhoods even stronger. And so it's not to take out all the single family and multifamily in the area, but really to kind of make it work better together and improve connectivity and other things. So. Secondly, we have been invited, we have 3 of the planning commissioners that will be joining on a boat tour with KEA. They invited us on a waterkeeper boat tour, and so we formed a small subcommittee. So a few staff members and 3 commissioners are going to be joining us on that trip. And so that'll be good just to look at the north shore of the lake and look at kind of, they've quoted the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I think for us it's educational to look at how our comprehensive plan and our shoreline ordinance are implemented into that. So Commissioners Ingalls, Lutrip, and Ward will be attending, and then we'll report back to everybody else. So. Good news on the missing middle housing. We did receive a grant from the National Association of Realtors, so thank you to our local Coeur d'Alene Association of Realtors for helping with that. So we'll be able to have the forum. We're looking at either August 13th or 14th, so I'll keep you posted on that. And the Envision Coeur d'Alene is the comprehensive plan update project. So the contract or the agreement is signed. Council approved that on June 18th. And we recently posted some frequently asked questions and answers on the city's website under the planning department page under comprehensive plan update, and just wanted to reassure community members we have not started the process in earnest. We were really just doing some research before that and getting the commission up to date on some of the demographics and school needs. But the public input will be robust, and we'll be starting that in the fall, and more details to follow. And lastly, for your August agenda, we have 2 items, an annexation and a variance.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Appreciate it. At this time, we'll go into our public hearings, and we have 2 items. And there's a sign-up sheet for the items. If you wish to speak on these, just sign up, fill out the appropriate box, and I'll call your name at that time. The first one is, the applicant is the City of Coeur d'Alene, a proposed amendment to the accessory dwelling unit code. Go ahead, Mike.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
This is accessory dwelling units proposed code amendments, also known as granny flats, secondary dwelling units. Little history and background on this project. Prior to January 2019, staff became aware that ADUs were difficult to be able to build above a garage due to the fact there was an 18-foot height requirement. So we set a goal to amend the ADU codes in January, and we formed a committee. And we held 3 workshops, one in February, March, April, and then we had a joint workshop in May. So the ADU code items, today's discussion items, there's 9 items. The first item is the ADU unit size, the second is building height, owner occupancy, parking space size, design standards, discussion of existing garages and sheds, setbacks, and then second story step backs and lot coverage and open space. So into the first discussion item. As you can see, ADUs can be either part of the existing principal dwelling, they could be an addition, or they could be a detached structure. So the first discussion item is ADU unit size, and the current code allows for a minimum of 300 and a maximum of 700, and the proposed code changes are no minimum size requirement, a maximum of 800 square feet, and the ADU shall not exceed 75% of the total square footage of the primary dwelling unit. The next item is that this shows the building height, illustrating the 18-foot and how the slope of the roof, and it's hard to get a living space above that. And the proposed height is 24 feet for a building height for a detached structure in the rear yard. So the current code allows for a slope of a height of 14 if it's a low slope, height of 18 with a slope greater than 2.5 to 12, and a maximum height of 32 feet in the buildable area. The proposed code is a maximum height of 24 feet for a unit above a garage. The roof of the slope requirements would be removed from the new detached ADUs, but second-story ADUs must meet the second-story step-back requirement. There's a maximum height of 18 feet for a one-story unit. Allowable projections per the existing code, such as chimneys and antennas, are allowed, but railings, parapets cannot exceed the maximum height. The next item is the owner occupancy requirement. Currently, there was, for an ADU, it had to be owner occupied for either the principal dwelling or the ADU. The proposed code changes says it's not required unless it's going to be part of a short-term rental property. So if it's a short-term rental property, then one of the units must be owner occupied. An affidavit would still need to be required for the ADU to acknowledge the ADU status of the property. ADU parking size and space. Right now, currently, there's 1 parking space required. Do not want to change that. And with the current size is 9 by 20. We looked at what other cities were doing, so maybe we wanted to reduce that. The group came up with, no, let's just keep it at 9 by 20. No change there, with 1 space required for an ADU. The next item is design standards. The current code allowed for some design standards, but we propose not requiring for new detached ADUs. However, if it was an attached unit, then it would have to comply with the existing structure to make it look and fit with the existing structure. Here's an example of an ADU that's not quite similar in style, but it's on the same property. Existing garages converted into ADUs. The current code does not allow it, and there's no provision for this. The proposed code changes allow for existing garages and sheds to be converted into an ADU, provided that the structure can meet the current adopted building codes and it is not over the property line or in the city's right-of-way. The structure could not be expanded upward or outward without triggering the non-conforming code and meeting the current standards. Existing 25-foot tall garages could be converted to an ADU without having to meet the 24-foot height maximum height or the second-story step-back requirement. Here's an example of an existing garage that was converted to an ADU, just to kind of illustrate what can happen for those types of units. There's another existing building turned into an ADU. The setbacks. Currently, ADUs are allowed to be 3 feet from the side property line. After the discussion of the work groups, we decided that 5 foot is the recommended side setback requirement, and that all ADUs shall be set back 5 feet from the side yard regardless. However, if you're near an alley, the rear yard could be 3 feet. If you're not near an alley, it would be 5 feet. Here's an illustration of an alley lot showing the side 5-foot side yards on each side, the 20-foot front, and this is the 25-foot rear yard, which mainly where these ADUs are being proposed to be built. And this is the 5 foot here, 3 off the alley, and 5 off the side. The second-story step back for ADUs. The current code does not address the second-story step back. However, the group thought it was important for a second-story step back to be addressed and implemented in the code. So the second-story step back is required for detached ADUs in the rear yard. This also came up for an addition, so we would like the Planning Commission to address this item. If it's an addition to a house and it's in the rear, because some houses are set back quite far, and an addition for an ADU in the back could be in the rear yard. So we'd want to get a discussion to see if you guys would think it would be all right for an addition to also be required to do the second-story step back if it's in the rear 25 feet. The upper step back would begin at 10-foot height on the interior side property line and 15 feet on the rear property line. There would also be not a second-story step back if it's on a corner lot. Eaves can project 2 feet into the step back space, and building permits submittals would be needed to show all dimensional setbacks and step backs. And here's some illustrations showing the second-story step back. 10 feet, 5 foot off the side, you start at 10 feet here, and that's a 1-to-1 ratio, so this is how this illustrated on a 50-foot lot could be built. Here's another illustration showing the 2-foot eaves, and that would be allowed. However, a roof overhang completely into this space would not be allowed. This is another illustration showing that this area would all be allowed except for this area right here, and this illustrates the side yard step back, second-story step back from the side. Here's another illustration showing from the alley how this would look. And this is the rear 25 feet, 15 feet up from the back of the alley, and then you start the 1-to-1 ratio, so you get a little more height off the rear. This is another illustration showing 3 feet from the rear. This one illustrates 5 feet from the rear, showing how this buildings can be built. And the last item is lot coverage and open space. The current code does not address lot coverage and open space. However, the work group decided it was a good idea to propose a code change. A 30% pervious surface would be required for all lots with an ADU. Pervious surfaces include such things as grass, astroturf, pavers, grasscrete, gravel, and decking materials, unless it is a concrete or impervious surface below it. There will not be a dimensional requirement or requirement for a certain type of quantity of landscaping other than the standard street tree requirements. The permit submittal will need to show all pervious areas on the lot in calculations. Here's an example of a 33% pervious area showing a house, driveway, patio, and garage on a standard 50 by 110 lot. Here's another 50 by 110 lot, and this is 29% pervious. Staff recommends that the code changes that are on the back of your staff report be recommended for approval, so you will need to make a decision tonight to recommend to the City Council to propose the code amendments to approve, deny, or direct staff to make changes. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions for Mike?
Mike, you talk about you had a subcommittee, did you not, to work on this?
We had an infill an ADU work group committee.
This is a citizen group of people that were,
Architects, professionals, builders, realtors were part of this group.
so on this first page, you show the different workshops and so forth that
That's
you had
correct.
with them, and as a result of that, this is coming forward.
This is correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Mr.
on-
Chairman, if I...
Oh, go ahead.
Randy asked me a quick question when Mike was presenting the conversion of existing garages, so I think a good point of clarification on that. So if someone converts a garage, they still have to maintain off-street parking. So they can't just convert a garage and then not have the off-street
Yeah.
parking. So the house would still be required to have 2 off-street parking and the ADU 1. So they still have to have 3, but if they have room on their property and want to convert a garage, they could still have some surface parking or a new garage or something. But I think that was a great question, and thought it'd be helpful to clarify to you and the community.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Mike.
Chairman,
Oh, I'm sorry.
did you have a decision point for us on the setback
Yeah,
step-back
the
requirements
step-back-
for
yes,
not
the-
a garage, but an actual
For an
house?
ADU that's attached to the principal dwelling, but you still require the second-story step back. And staff recommends you should. We just want to get a clarification from you guys if that's what you guys are thinking.
I would assume so.
Okay. Okay, we could put that in the code for the next, when we move forward. All right.
Thank you. I have Kevin Jester. He wishes to speak. Come on up, Kevin. And just state your name and
Kevin Jester.
swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I will.
And thank you for being on that committee. by the
It
way.
was my pleasure to be on that committee. And thank you for hearing us out. And thanks to the planning department team, and thanks to all of the members of the subcommittee that showed up and worked together well to come up with these recommendations. I heartily support it and ask that you also do that. I think this will go a long ways to preserving some of the older neighborhoods, which are really the ones that are impacted by these ADUs. Small lots, old homes, not a lot to room to move, and some real impacts with daylight if we don't take a look at these kinds of regulations. So I heartily recommend that you approve this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. I have Josh Schur, wishes to speak.
Josh Sir, 924 North 6th Street.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Go ahead, Josh.
So first off, I'll echo Kevin's sentiments, and I was on the committee also, and thank you to Mike and Hillary for bringing us all in and getting input from all different facets of the community. I mean, builders, architects, nonprofit housing. I think they did a great job of looking at it from all sides before they brought it to you. So I hope you see fit to move forward with the changes. I think the ADU's always been a desired housing product in any downtown core, and as our infill starts to become less available to non-existent effectively, I think it's going to become more demand. So what these changes do is they'll preserve the integrity of the residential parts of the neighborhood and still allow homeowners to actually put these in. Some of the restrictions that were in with the heights before made it fairly a non-starter to even do it. If you had an existing garage, you had to pick between a garage or an ADU. So I would recommend you move forward with it and appreciate the opportunity to participate.
Thank you. Appreciate your committee. Thank you. Sharon Clark, wished to speak, did not indicate. No? Okay. That's all I have, so I'm going to close the public testimony at this point and bring it to the commissioners. Go ahead, John.
Just a couple comments, if I could. I'd echo the thanks to, it's a great process when you get folks involved that they live this. They're designers, they're builders, they're folks that live this. And to reach out and bring them into a work group, that's a great approach. And I think the city deserves to pat you folks on the back. Just to read the names again, Kevin Jester, thank you. Shauna Clark, Josh Schur, Adam Graves, and our very own chair, Tom Messina, gave their time in this. And so,
Thank you.
but 4 workshops, that's a lot of input, a lot of debate, a lot of marination, fine-tuning, iteration. I think it's ready to go.
I'd also like to make a comment and to thank staff for putting that all together, and Mike, coordinating all this. There's a lot of information, a lot of people that were on the committee, and we went back and forth on a few items and stuff, and clarifications, and a lot of visuals, which helped us out to get to the point that we were. And especially I want to thank the commissioners for the workshop that we had with Mike prior to this, so we understood, and all the commissioners understood exactly what we're doing here before we got to this point. So my hat's off to you guys, as always. Is this just a simple motion, Randy, or do I have to do a roll call?
It should just be a simple motion.
Simple motion. So I'm looking for a motion and a second on that motion.
I move to recommend to City Council to approve the amendment to the accessory dwelling unit code.
Thank you. I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Comment
Thank
from
you.
staff here. Go ahead.
Oh,
You'd mentioned something about the step back for
We should
attached.
add in that
dwelling.
that
Motion should include
addition-
that.
Yeah, motion
Okay.
of the addition.
Can I just amend my motion to
Yes.
include
Yeah.
the addition, including the step back requirement?
I have an amended motion.
I'll second that.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for bringing that up. Appreciate it. Our next public hearing is Rivers Edge Apartments LLC is the applicant. It's located at 3528 West Celtice Way. There's actually two items on this. A proposed 22.17 acre plan unit development known as River Edge PUD, as well as a proposed 29 lot preliminary plot known as River's Edge. Go ahead, Mike, you coming up? Thank you. And there is a sign-up sheet. Hopefully, everyone signed up who wants to be heard. If not, we will not hear your comments.
All righty, thank you. Just wanted to go over a little procedures prior to, so all the audience knows what's going to happen. It's a public hearing process. They'll open the hearing. Staff will give a presentation on the staff report. The applicant will present, make a presentation. Public has an opportunity for comment, and the applicant has a chance to respond. And then they'll close the public hearing, and then deliberations, and then findings will need to be made.
Thank you for bringing that up. Appreciate it.
Yes, there's PUD is River's Edge Plan Unit Development and subdivision, 29 lot subdivision. The applicant is River's Edge LLC. The architect is Whipple Consulting Engineers. The two requests are a plan unit development that will allow a 250 unit apartment facility, a mini storage facility, and a private gated residential community. The other request is a 29 lot preliminary plat known as River's Edge. The location of the property is located at 3528 West Celtice Way. Legal notice was published in the Coeur d'Alene Press on June 22nd, 2019, and all other required notifications have been made. Here's a location of the map of the subject site. Here's Interstate 90. This is Celtice Way. This is the Spokane River. Here's a close-up aerial photograph of the property. Property is split by the city-owned property here. The prior application in December was a joint application with the city that it didn't include in this. This application does not include that. Here's a bird's eye view looking north. So the first item is the PUD. Here is the applicant's proposed site plan. The applicant is proposing a self-storage unit facility here with RVs located here and an office here. It's also a 250 unit apartment complex that is located here with individual garages for the apartments located here. Also be a clubhouse and a recreational play area here. It's also a gated community down by the river. There's a gate here and a gate here. The applicant does have access easement over across the city's property to access this area. There are 28 individual single-family dwelling lots located along the river with 2 open space proposed tracks. The applicant has also indicated a 16-foot wide trail that traverses the property and connects to the east and to the west. The applicant is also proposing a 6-foot block wall to the on this track next to the trail that'll separate the single-family dwelling units from the multifamily. Here's a survey of the property indicating the property to the north. The density for the apartments is calculated on the whole piece. It's a mixed-use property, so you can have the commercial units and the dwelling units will count for the whole part of that property. The single family is located to the south, and that is R12. Here's some building elevations of the apartment buildings. The applicant has indicated they will meet the building requirement of 45 feet in height, and that is the max height allowed in the C17. Here's some elevations of the storage facility buildings. elevations of the RV storage buildings, and recreational building elevation. The applicant has submitted a building envelope plan, and he's indicated on the single-family dwellings that there'll be a 10-foot from the curb located here. However, there will be a garage setback of 20 feet. View corridor map showing the view corridors the applicant is proposing. A landscaping plan the applicant has indicated showing where the trees will be planted along Celtice Way and along the private road and within the development. There are 7 findings that must be met in order for planned unit development to be approved. Finding B8A through B8G. We'll go through each one of these individually, starting with B8A. The proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan indicates this area is in the Spokane River District area, and it's highlighted here in the green area, which is the areas that are in transition, and areas that are in transition are likely to change over the planning period with uses and structures. The Spokane River District is envisioned to be an area that the scale of development will be urban in nature, promoting multimodal connectivity to downtown. The overall density may approach 10 to 16 dwelling units per acre, but pockets of denser housing are appropriate and encouraged. Open space and parks, pedestrian and bicycle connections, and other public spaces will be provided throughout, especially adjacent to the Spokane River. The next 2 slides illustrate the comprehensive plan objectives as it relates to this PUD request. The full list is on page 8 and 9 of your staff report. One of the objectives, 1.12, support the enhancement of existing urbanized areas and discourage sprawl. Promote the efficient use of existing infrastructure, thereby reducing impacts to undeveloped areas. Protect and preserve existing neighborhoods from incompatible land uses and developments. Provide strict protection requirements for all public and private waterfront developments. Protect the key vistas and view corridors of the hillside and waterfronts from the Coeur d'Alene, making it unique. Promote bicycle and pedestrian connectivity and access between neighborhoods, open spaces, parks, and trail systems. The comprehensive plan also addresses shorelines. Shorelines is a priority and should be protected. Make public access to the river and lake shorelines a priority. The next finding is finding B8B, that the design and planning of the site is or is not compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. Here's some site photos on the center of the property looking east. This is the center of the property looking south. This is on the east part looking west. And this is on the east part looking south. And this is clear on the southwest side looking east. Here's a zoning map showing the zoning of the property. The C-17 is to the north, R-12 is to the south. Once again, this part is not part of this PUD. R8 PUD to the west, and the C-17L PUD is located also to the west. Existing land use map, you got commercial to the west, single family to the west, vacant area with existing place, and to the east is vacant. To the north, we have commercial, light manufacturing, and this is also commercial in the county. Phasing plan, the applicant is proposing to phase the project with the 2 phases of the apartment. Apartment phase 1 would be this area, apartment 2 phase here. The first phase would also include the residential development along the river and the mini storage facility. The next finding is finding B8C, that the proposal is or is not compatible with the natural features of the site and adjoining properties. The subject site property is higher along Celtice Way and slopes downward towards the Spokane River to the south. There are no topographical or other physical constraints that would make the subject property unsuitable for the proposed PUD request. Here's a topographic map illustrating the topography, showing a 30-foot drop. This is 2160, and this is 2130 along the river, so approximately 30-foot fall along the property. The next finding is finding B8D. The location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will or will not be adequately served by the existing public facilities and services. This application has been routed through the city departments. Each department has indicated that there are adequate public facilities and public utilities available to serve the proposed request. The full staff comments are on page 25 through 28 of the staff report. Streets and traffic. Celtice Way is a principal arterial road, and Celtice Way is a newly constructed street cross-section, street section that was designed to handle the development potential of the site and the surrounding properties. The next finding is finding B8E. The proposal does or does not provide adequate private common open space area as determined by the commission, no less than 10% of the gross land area free of buildings, streets, driveways, or parking areas. The common open space shall be accessible to all users of the development and usable for open space and recreational purposes. The applicant is proposing 10% open space that can be accessed by the public and residents of the proposed development. There are 2 proposed public open space tracts located adjacent to the Spokane River that will allow public access to the river. The applicant is proposing a native passive active recreation area in the tracts with a 3-foot wide pedestrian paths leading to the river. Here are the 2 locations on the whole property where these open spaces will be located. This is the private open spaces that is associated with the multifamily facility. These are the public open spaces associated that public can access along the trail. Here's a close-up aerial photograph of how those will be developed with a 3-foot wide native trail going down to the river and the passive active recreation. The next finding is finding B8F. Off-street parking does or does not provide parking sufficient for users of the development. There is no request made to change the city's off-street parking requirements through the PUD process. The applicant will meet all the parking requirements for the multifamily and the commercial, and single-family homes will be required to provide 2 off-street paved parking spaces per unit, which is consistent with the code requirements for single-family residential. Applicant has also submitted a parking plan illustrating how he'll meet that requirement. The last finding is finding BHE that the proposal does or does not provide for adequate method for the perpetual maintenance for all the common open space. Riverjudge LLC and design team will work with the City and Coeur d'Alene Legal Department on all required language for the CCR articles of incorporation and bylaws, and any language that will be required to be placed on the final subdivision plat in regards to maintenance of all the private infrastructure. The HOA will be responsible for continued maintenance of all the open space, streets, traffic signage, and all common property. That concludes the PUD presentation. This will now go into the subdivision presentation and the subdivision findings. And there are 4 findings that must be met for a subdivision to be approved. Findings B7A through B7D. And we will go through each one of those. Starting with the first one, the finding B7A, that all of the general preliminary plat requirements have or have not been met as attested by the city engineer. And the city engineer has indicated the preliminary plat submitted contains all the general preliminary plat requirements, elements and requirements by the municipal code. The next finding is B7B, that the provisions for sidewalks, streets, alleys, right-of-ways, and easements, street lighting, fire protection, planting, drainage, pedestrian, and bicycle facilities and utilities are or are not adequate. Staff has indicated there are adequate public services and facilities available. Staff has recommended 14 conditions as part of this PUD and subdivision request, and as noted before, the full list of the staff comments are on pages 25 through 28 of your staff report. The next finding is finding B8C, that the proposed preliminary plat does or does not comply with all the subdivision design standards and all of the subdivision improvement standards and requirements. Per the city engineer, the review for the proposal of the preliminary plat, both subdivision design standards and improvement standards have been vetted for compliance. Because the proposed streets are private, adherence to the city standards for widths are not required. The last finding is finding B7D. The lots proposed for the preliminary plat do or do not meet the requirements of the applicable zoning district. The proposed lots in the C17 and R12 district meet the minimum requirements for lot width, lot area for each zoning district. The applicant is not requesting a modification of any of the zoning requirements for either of the 2 zoning districts. The proposed preliminary plat meets the requirements of each of the applicable zoning districts. These are the 14 recommendations. There's the first 3, 4 through 7, 8 through 11, 12 through 14. They're on the back of your staff report. The decision points and findings. So the two requests, we need separate findings for the PUD, a planned unit development that will allow a 250-unit apartment facility, a mini storage facility, and a private gated residential community is the first request. And the second one is S219, a 29-lot preliminary plat known as River's Edge. The Planning Commission will need to consider this request and may make separate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. Questions? John?
Thank you, Mike. A couple questions, if I could. If you could maybe pull up an overall sort of site plan map of sorts.
Is there? Let's go this way. Might be a little faster. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
So open space is a big deal. We know that. The finding that we have to make up here is that the developer has to provide 10% open space, like any PUD. So the PUD criteria, the PUD finding by itself doesn't require public open space. It requires open space, correct?
That is correct.
But the annexation agreement, as I've read through, requires some notion. It doesn't say how many acres, how many linear feet or anything, but it says public access to the Spokane River is a requirement.
That is true. The annexation agreement does mention that access to the river is a requirement, and the applicant has provided that access through those two open space tracts.
So we have that. If I've done the homework, it looks like it'd be two parcels, roughly an acre, so a half acre apiece, 120 total lineal feet of waterfront, something like that.
That's right.
So we have to make, as you well know, we have to make this finding B8F, parking sufficient for users. So if the public, by the annexation agreement, is a de facto, is rolled into this as a user, how do we determine whether there's sufficient parking for users? I don't see any plausible parking there. If I want to drive down there a couple of years from now and go enjoy one of those two parcels, show me how I do that.
You can't.
I can't?
Right now, the only way to access this is through a pedestrian. The pedestrian bikeway will have public access through biking and walking. You'll be able to walk and bike to access this way. This will be a private commercial self-storage facility, and this will be a private multifamily facility.
But we also have gates.
And there's also gates that must be
So
approved
how
through
do you
the
get through
PUD.
those gates to get there? It's like Shoreview, you have gates and a concrete wall, you don't
The
get through.
gates,
How do you get through, as a public person, through a private gate to get down to a public park amidst the private community?
I'll let
Two
the
gates
I'll let
locked
the
one.
applicant speak to how they're going to let the
And a
public get
concrete
down
block
there.
wall.
Yeah.
It's
but
like Shoreview,
It's my understanding, yeah, that it is going to be just like the one to the.
just like Shoreview.
I think we should address that to the applicant.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's
John,
important that.
hold on, Pete. Are you done?
I had one more question,
Sure.
and I'll be done. And I'm not trying to trick
No,
you
yeah,
up here.
I get your point, yeah.
Yeah, I just sharing with you what I'm struggling with.
Yes.
So the other one is finding B8B, which we're going to need to make a finding of compatibility with adjacent properties. And the struggle is, you've got this property that runs right through the middle of it called the city property. It's currently a weed patch. You're a planner, tell us how we make that judgment call. What is it now? What does it want to be? What might be?
Yeah.
How do we
That's a future.
judge that
yeah.
compatibility with a future question mark?
Well, I guess you look at the zoning and see it's C-17 zoning, so all the C-17 zoning would be allowed in that area. So anything permitted in the C-17.
So the city
gas
could put up pole
stations,
barns in
Pole
there.
barns, gas station,
Yeah,
whatever's allowed in the C-17 would be permitted there.
I'm just struggling with that, but
Yeah, I
thanks, Mike.
All right, just on that point, though, on C-17, and then Pete, we'll go right to you. In our staff report, I know we're dealing with R-12 and C-17, but it also says the C-17 zoning district regulations state that multifamily uses must follow the R-17.
That's correct.
And I want to make sure that we here all understand that the R-17 there are some requirements, and I think the applicant is following them as far as height goes.
That's correct. They're meeting the setback requirements for the R17 in this area, so everything in the multifamily area in this location would have to meet the standards of the R17, which would be the building height, setback requirements, the R17 density. Yeah.
The applicant is indicating, I believe, 45-foot height for those buildings, and that's what the requirement states here in the R17.
That is correct. They're not asking for a modification or to go higher.
Okay. And then, I'm sorry, Pete, go ahead.
No, that's fine.
Oh, all right. The shoreline, 150 feet within the shoreline, the single-family homes are within that. Can you touch on, I know we have information
Yeah,
in
some of these
here.
lots are really deep. They go past, I think, he's got one of the plans show the 150-foot setback. So these lots are completely within the 150 feet, and these are kind of crossed. But anything within the 150 feet would have a max height of 32 feet,
Oh, how much?
32 feet.
32, because in here it says building height 30 feet.
Oh, I misspoke. Then it's 30 feet. That's correct,
30
sorry.
feet. Okay, all right, so that's the max height for
Yeah,
the housing.
that's correct.
Okay. Go ahead, Pete, I'm sorry.
Well, I know we can ask the applicant, but I'd sort of like to ask you to
Sure.
see how the process works for the planning department, because I assume you meet with the applicant and so forth, there's been discussions and whatnot. And so on this gate, do you know where the gates are, and will that provide access to the public, or do they have to go through the gates?
I'll let them speak to that, but my understanding through the applicant is this is going to be gated for vehicle access. I'm not for sure if there's pedestrian access down this way or not, but I thought the main access for pedestrians were this way and they would cross in. I'm not sure the details on the gated access up here, but
So you
there's a gate
didn't ask
here
them?
and a gate here.
You didn't inquire that for the... No,
That didn't come up at the time, no.
Secondly, the 6-foot wall, what's the thinking from the planning department about that vis-à-vis vistas and connectability and views, et cetera?
Yeah, obviously, planning department, it's a permitted use to do it, so you can put a 6-foot fence up on your property.
Is there
So,
some?
I mean, it's not like it's a planning, it's a permitted use to do
You've
a
also
six.
heard us talk about vistas and views.
Well, the view corridor at the property does slope, and it's higher along SLT, so you would be able to see, if you're up 30 feet high, you're only, when you're driving your bike, you're not gonna see anything.
Well, exactly.
But if you're up higher along Celtius Way,
Or,
you would
you know, you got
have
a
a view
drone.
corridor. So, I
The-
mean, it's
the other
a
is-
complicated,
Does this meet all our shoreline code?
it does.
Okay. And a nit, well, it's not really a nit, but it came up in a meeting I think we had with the city when we were talking about comprehensive plan and so forth. The fire department comes in and makes reviews and so forth, and opines and directs and whatnot to make sure we have fire safety. The police department said they have a program that looks at lighting to make sure that it's safe. This is a pretty big area that's got a lot of use on it. Have we asked the police department, has anybody asked the police department to sort of survey the plan and how that is, if the lighting is adequate for public safety?
The police department does not review this plan.
Pardon me?
They do not review the plan, but part of the staff's requirement is for full cutoff lighting during the commercial areas, for security and for not to be too bright, to overspill into the other properties. So there will be a lighting plan that'll be required to be submitted for the commercial development.
And will the police department review that?
They're not, as far as the city's procedures, that police departments do not review this at this time,
We
but I
had
guess
that one meeting, you may, yeah, I'm just.
Yeah, it's a good
I'm
question.
just proposing that
Yeah.
you think about that.
Yeah.
It made some sense, and it was very good, very good. And that's the total of my questions.
Okay, well, thank you.
Peter, there is a, on the back page, or next to the back page of our
Something there next time.
site plans, there is like a legend, orange dots and arrows for public access. And if you take a look at it, you'll see where there is pedestrian access all the way from Celtice all the way down through a gated
Walking, pedestrian,
walking, right?
Yeah.
riding a bike or.
Correct. You see that on the second to last page, that orange dot starting at the top by Celtice. I just wanted
It
to try to
doesn't
answer
show
your
the
question.
gates there, Michael, or?
I'm not saying it doesn't show the gates, it shows that that's the access points for
Yeah, there's like an
pedestrians. So
orange
there-
arrow, that-
I think to answer your question, that information is presented this way in
Yeah.
front of us.
I have one.
All right, hold on. Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, the wall, is that is to separate the single use from the multifamily?
That's my understanding, but the
Okay, I
applicant
thought I
could
read
address
something that
that.
there was also a benefit to maintenance of trails. Is that a different wall or berm?
I think the trail, it's, if it was next to the road, it was gonna, they were gonna plow onto the trail, but now it's gonna be road wall trail, so that the Parks Department is gonna be all right with this type of
Okay.
setup.
Okay, then.
The
All right.
plowing of the road will not plow over the trail.
All right. We're being asked to look at some approval points that were generated, I assume, by the city. And one of them particularly is very fuzzy, number 11, and it goes to this path. Build a 16-foot shared use path on either the city's property or on the subject property with a wall. So I'm assuming there's been some discussion that wall and path could be separated. Because you got it here in
There
black
is an
and white.
opportunity for the trail to be moved on the city's property.
And who would pay for that trail?
That's a good question.
Okay, so that's a tough point to
Yeah.
include in this at this point in time. Okay, just want to know.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
Okay, Mike,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Okay. Lance, state your name.
Lance Douglas.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, Lance, go ahead.
See if I can get this working.
And Lance, you heard a few of the comments, and, you know, if you want to address some of those, so perhaps.
I
During the
can either go
presentation?
through the presentation first, or I can address
Sure.
the comments now. Either way is fine with me.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I think Mike did a good job covering the points of our project. A lot of this is going to be doubling up on what he said. I started out my presentation just with a map showing what the prior use of was of the site. Prior to 2005, the site was covered by a pellet log manufacturing plant, part of a lumber mill that's located east of the site, which is now owned by City of Coeur d'Alene. Then in 2006, Marshall Chesron came along. They bought the site. They tore down the pellet stove and the pellet log manufacturing plant. It resulted in the site as you see it today. And after Marshall was done, Washington Trust came into ownership of the property. Washington Trust hired Vertus, a local land use planning company, to take them through the annexation process and get the property annexed into the City of Coeur d'Alene. Part of that process required that Vertus provide the city with a map that depicted what the property would develop as. And this was a map right out of the annexation packet. The yellow, which is bounded by the old railroad right-of-way to the south and southeast to the north, depicts a C-17 zone and whatever uses are allowed in that zone. And then the green, which is along the water, is an R12 zone, which allows residential uses or several types of uses in that area. The white area that goes through our site, as Mike had pointed out, at the time it was annexed, this was owned by Burlington Northern Railroad and was actually active. Since that time, the City of Coeur d'Alene has acquired that. So now this is city property, and there's been some questions on that tonight, and we'll answer those to the best of my ability when I'm done. But that is not part of our proposal. It was part of our last proposals, but it's no longer part now. So that brings us to our current proposal. Again, I'm going to be a little redundant on that. Mike covered the fact that we have self-storage on the northwest corner of our site in this area here. We have 250 apartments that front on Celtice, directly east of the self-storage facility. We have not done anything with the old railroad right-of-way, as we don't own that. The City of Coeur d'Alene still owns this piece here, and it's not part of our application. We have the trail that's been a subject of some questions tonight. that's located on my R12 portion of the property as required by the annexation agreement. There was a provision in the annexation agreement that we can get into that allows me to put that on the railroad right-of-way with the cities, or whoever owns it, which is the city now, with their permission. We have a wall that we've talked a little bit about adjacent to the trail. On the south side of the wall, we have a road that serves access to all the lots on the water. We have 2 access points through public tracks, 60 feet wide, for the public to get access to the water. There's been a little bit, we have a gate here, and we have a gate here. These are for vehicular traffic only. So we have sidewalks that go around the gate to allow pedestrian bicycles to access all the way from Celtice, all the way down through the gate, down to the public track out into the water. Or the public can access along the trail that hooks to the railroad right-of-way in Mill River. And then on the east end, it hooks to the city of Coeur d'Alene Atlas Mill property that they recently purchased. So we have access down to this tract here via this point through the fence, and we have it right here. So the houses that we're proposing on the water, this southern portion of our site is very similar to what you have in Mill River directly to the west of us. It pretty much matches it exactly. What you have over there, as you all know, is you have the railroad right-of-way directly north of the shoreline. I believe it's shoreline, part of the Mill River subdivision. It's got the fence separating the railroad right-of-way and the users from the public access, or the access road to the houses. Then it has the houses that front out onto the water. For the majority of the frontage, you're going to have from the trail or the railroad right-of-way, you're going to have the wall with the road behind the wall, and then you'll have the houses that front on the water. Looking from the water, you're going to look back, you're going to have houses that are within that 150-foot shoreline ordinance area, and that specifically allows for houses to be located 40 feet from the water and 30 feet high. And we're not asking for any variances of that. So we'll have the houses at 40 feet back and 30 feet up, just like the code allows. This picture shows docks. We're not proposing docks in our proposal. Docks are allowed under a different permit from Department of Lands. The homeowners can apply for those individually, but they're not something that we're going to be putting in. Most of the frontage is going to be a private beach, although we do have the 2 access points on the public tracks that do allow the public to access the water as required in the building or the code and required under our annexation agreement. Compatibility has been brought up a little bit today. Again, this is our site. Right here, Mike did a good job presenting this. This is our C-17 section of the site. As you can see directly to the east of us, it's all zone C-17 and whatever uses the city may put on their property. Everything north of us across Celtice is all 17 in the city. The portion directly across from us is zone commercial in Kootenai County. The property that's adjacent to our self-storage site is zone C-17, that's the U.S. Bank Call Center. And down here, we have single-family houses on the water, which we're just going to continue that same pattern along our whole front. So we pretty much have 100% compatibility with all the surrounding uses for what's allowed in the zone. I'm going through the file. There was a response from We the People of Coeur d'Alene, a letter dated July 1st, 2019. And I would like to take the time to address many points that were in that. The first point was that people said that we had to do a full-blown PUD, which that's what we've applied for. Our application is a full PUD. It's not a LD PUD. It's a full PUD. So we can check that box. We have to create public access to the river. We have public access to the river through our 2 public tracks, 60 feet wide, as required by code in the annexation agreement. So we've met that requirement. We have to have provide open views to the river. We've lined up our public access points to line up with our 2 roads that come into the site. So there are no standards for public views to the river, just so we get that out right now. There's no code requirement that says exactly how wide a public view has to be, how narrow it can be, how often it has. There's nothing. So there's not really a standard for the public views. However, we do have 2 public views to the river that are unobstructed from Celtice. We're required, or we the people say we have to put a 16-foot wide trail along our R12 parcel. We show the trail on our R12 parcel adjacent to the railroad right-of-way. We do have a letter from the City of Coeur d'Alene Parks Department authorizing us to put the trail in the railroad right-of-way. More than willing to put the trail in the railroad right-of-way, that's fine with me. We'll bear the cost. We have to put a trail in either on our portion of the site or the railroad right-of-way. We drew it the way that we did because we wanted to show that we can accommodate the trail on our parcel regardless of whether the city wants it on their parcel or not. So if the city chooses to have it over there, which the city park department wants it over there, that's fine with us. We'll put it over on the city right-of-way. Provide public parking. There is no requirement that we provide public parking. There's no requirement in the annexation agreement. There's no requirement in the code that we provide public parking, and thus we're not providing public parking. The last thing on the letter was that we had to be compatible with surrounding uses. I think I already covered that. We're 100% compatible with all four sides of us. And then the letter gets into a land swap. A land swap was part of a previous proposal that we had, and that we, the people, go into, if we do a land swap, what the conditions are should be for the approval of the land swap. I'm not proposing a land swap. This proposal stands on its own. I don't need a land swap. So that's not part of this. But I would like to take a couple minutes to address the conditions that we, the people, had if there ever was a land swap, even though there's not a land swap. Our current proposal, we're outrightly allowed 250 units on the site. The land swap portion of the property that we would swap for in a previous proposal allowed 130 units. So we have 380 units in that area outrightly allowed. We, the people, letter wanted to do the land swap, which we're not proposing, and limit us to 360 units, thus cutting our density by 20 units. Again, we're not proposing that. So we certainly wouldn't agree to lose density for something that we're not proposing. They wanted to have a 60-foot easement along the waterfront for public trail. Again, we've had that discussion before in front of you guys several months ago that we had a trail on the water, and that was denied, and we've taken that out. There's not a requirement for that we put a trail on the water. It's not required in the annexation agreement. It's not required by any code. And so therefore, we're not providing a 60-foot public access trail along the water. No structure within 100 feet of the river. That's not required by any code. The shoreline ordinance clearly allows 40 feet from the water as a setback. That's what you have in Mill River. Bella Reeve, I believe, is closer than that. We're going to live with what the code says, 40 feet from the water and 30 feet high, which the height goes to their last point of strict compliance with building height. We're not asking for any variance on building height. So we're just not asking for a lot here. The things that they want to consider are, if we approve the site, is that you should consider imposing on us a river walk, beach access, benches, landscape maintenance. Again, all the things that we had in our last proposal that was denied by the board. Those aren't part of this proposal. There's not a trail on the water. That's a separate proposal. It's up for reconsideration in September to the city council. That's not part of this. It's not required. We're not proposing any of that. Provide public parking for users of the trail. Again, the city of Coeur d'Alene owns the whole right-of-way. They can park in the whole right-of-way if they want. It's their property. It's a C-17 zone. They can do with that right-of-way what they want. It's their property. They can park in it. And then the last requirement or request for consideration was that any boat docks be made 25% public day use. Again, we're not proposing any docks for it. Docks are allowed from the Department of Lands for private docks. They control that. There's no code requirement that somebody who has a private dock on the water allow public use of their dock. That's just not a requirement. We would not agree to that if we had docks, but we don't have docks, so it's not an issue for us. And that's the end of my presentation. So I think you have some questions for me?
Let me start, Your Honor. So, addressing the access, or those two areas of public access towards the river,
Yes.
no access actually directed into the water at those points, or can people get in the river?
Oh, yeah, they can get, well,
Okay.
it's public access. This
Yeah, those
this
2 points.
60-foot tract here
Right.
Goes all the way from the roadway, all the way to the water.
All right, so they can get in the water if they want to.
Absolutely.
Okay. Is those two parcels going to be fenced on either side for the residents that are on the left or right of those properties, or is it going to be just an open?
They could be fenced through a permit through the city.
Okay, all right.
We're not proposing a fence right now. We're proposing, we'll be selling the lots. We won't be building the houses.
Right, so I mean, if someone wants to put a fence up, there's no requirement saying they can't because it's a public access to the river area.
Correct.
I understand the docks that you said, the requirements that aren't. And on the sheet P5 that we have here, and I don't know if you have it, it says alternate trail location. It's indicated on this.
Right.
I don't quite know what that means
So-
for what.
One of the back pages, there's a letter from the Coeur d'Alene Parks Department. And in that letter, I don't know if it's the park manager or I don't know who signed it. You have it in your packet. It gives us, it authorizes us to put the trail in the in the railroad right-of-way. So we drew it on our property because that's where the annexation agreement says that we're supposed to have it, on the property south of the right-of-way. So we thought it was important, or I thought it was important, to show, look, we're going to propose a trail on the R12 piece because that's what's required in the annexation agreement. The city doesn't want it on the R12 property. They want it in their railroad right-of-way. So we showed that as that's the alternate route. We'll put it there if that letter actually authorizes us, gives us permission to do it. So that's fine with me. But I just wanted to live by the letter of the annexation agreement and not take anything for granted that, look, we're putting it over here, because then your question would be, has the city council given you approval for that? And we're going to be saying no. So we have authorization from the Parks Department. We'll put it up there if they want. It'll be our expense to put it there. We've
Okay.
already committed to that. So we can go either way.
Okay, great, appreciate that. And then relating to the 6-foot wall, you showed a picture of the other development next to your property. It'd be very similar. You still have access to the alternate trail or the trail or wherever it is. It's basically going to be the same type of situation. The wall is separating the river houses from that trail.
Correct.
Okay. That's all I have. Go ahead,
I
John.
have a question.
Thank
Oh,
you.
let John go ahead. We'll start at that and work our way over.
Thank you for your presentation and private streets and parking. There's a couple questions there. You're a developer down in Bellerive. Perhaps you've seen some of the meetings and dialogue we've had with the Bellerive Homeowners Association. I'm sure you followed all of that, where they've asked to put gates up on their private streets. And down there, those private streets are really doing the service of providing public access to public space down there. And I'm seeing a parallel here where we might create a similar problem down here where there's public access and there's a public amenity, there's a public draw. People are going to want to go down there and whatnot, and shy of a bicycle or a car or whatnot, I can't get there. So the question for you is how does this square with, you have a statement in your narrative that says that those areas down there, those public areas, quote, this area serves a diverse population by providing a variety of spaces for recreation, accessibility by people of different ages and abilities. That kind of suggests, that if I'm not able to walk long distances or bicycle, I can use that. It's a nice statement of usability and accessibility, but I don't know that it really holds up, because the closest place I have to park is where?
Well, nowhere are we required to have vehicular access to the public access points to the water. You won't find that in the code. You won't find that in the annexation agreement. We have to have public access to the water, and we're providing public access to the water through the gates for bicycles, walkers, scooters, however else you want to do it. It's not a blanket statement where we have to accommodate every single person, no matter what they could ever imagine bringing down there. So that's how I square that. As part of the Bellerive thing, one thing that you're omitting on that discussion with Bellerive is I have the 11 lots at the end of Bellerive on the west end, and I have an easement through that existing road. and they cannot legally put a gate off and cut my access off through there. So although people may be using that for public access to the trail, they have a legal issue on that I have an easement along their private road to come all the way down through. And that's something that doesn't get talked a lot through the meetings with Bella Reeve and the gate and Magnuson and everybody else is like, oh, we'll take care of that. Well, they're not gonna take care of that because you can't fence me out. So that's a little bit different. But you do have a similar situation in that they have a parking problem down there. They have narrow streets. They don't have room. They want to keep the public out of that. And that's why they're proposing the gates, because they can't park their own cars down there.
Just to follow up, so as far as those two parcels of public space, I think in making our findings, we have to assess the usability of that. And I guess I'm maybe struggling a little bit of the practical usability of those spaces if there's nowhere to park. We are working in the design of the Atlas parcel, that's the city's parcel, and a lot of us have been involved in workshops. And one of the central themes is, based on other areas of the city, whether it's Independence Point or whether it's Mill River or whether it's Bella Reeve and Riverstone, is, there's, on a nice sunny Saturday, there's not enough parking. There's not enough. People are going to be drawn there. Is it? How usable is that?
Well, one thing that you're omitting though is you own, you being the city of Coeur d'Alene, you own all this property through here. You own all of that. This access point is across the street. So if we move this trail out into the alternate route, out in the railroad right-of-way, which that's where the Parks Department wants it, you're gonna have parking 40 feet away from this curb line right here. You have a 30-foot road. Well, it's closer than that, I guess. The road will be right on the edge of the property line, so it'd be 30 foot and then your parking spot. So you have the ability, with the property that you own as a city of Coeur d'Alene, to provide parking in this railroad right-of-way within 30 or 40 foot of those access points.
Do you anticipate that's what that city parcel is going to be used for?
That's a good question, what it's gonna be used for. I don't know. It's not my property. So it's up to all of you as the owners of it to decide what it's gonna be used for.
If it did develop at least partially into parking, would that strike you as compatible?
I wouldn't object to it being parking.
I've got
I
a
mean, it's
question
better
on
than a weed
that for
patch.
staff for 1 second. Given this scenario, whether Mike, Hillary, or Randy can answer this, given the word accessibility to public space, and I understand what John's saying about how do we make that finding, if parking isn't part of that accessibility, though, code-wise says it doesn't have to be. And I'm not disagreeing or agreeing with John's statement. There's still accessibility, whether it's walking or biking. And I hear what John's saying. If someone can't do one of those two, they can't get to that. So I'd like your opinion from staff on what we should consider accessibility to access open space, if you can answer that for me.
Well, the annexation agreement simply says that design and provide open space and/or other public access to the Spokane River. It doesn't specify, there's no definition of public access.
Doesn't spell
It is access, it is open to the
Doesn't
public.
specify automobiles, bicycles, or anything, just access.
Correct,
Just wide
just
open.
access.
Okay, I appreciate that. Mike, you had a question, sorry. I'll cut you off before.
Cut off.
I have a quick question for you, Lance. If the trail is allowed, and according to you, there's an agreement to move it onto the city right away, that as the alternative location, would you, as a developer, maintain the wall in the present proposed location, and then instead of a trail, there might be a buffer of landscape that could be maintained by the property owners?
No, we would move the trail out to the property line.
Or the wall?
Move the wall out to
Excuse me.
property line.
Yes, you're correct, sorry.
Okay.
The wall would move out to the property line.
Okay. I have an interjection. I've worked on the Shoreview, I've worked on probably 50% of those houses, inside and outside, I know the clientele, and that's your target market. I I can say that those folks are not going to want the cross path of random public entering into their private street. It's just a clash of interests. But I do see a real simple solution. If this is all bike ped, why don't we move those green spaces outside on the end portions so that they then have two accessible locked gates and they have their privacy, but on the ends, they have the green space for the public that do not enter through their gates at any time. Because those clientele, those are multi-million dollar homes. And they don't want Tom, Dick, and Harry and their kids and their dogs and God knows what, and all the debris. That's exactly what happened to us in Bellerive. And I empathize with those folks. And I think it's solvable if you take and assume that this is all just bike ped. It's not a car. But maybe we do find parking in our green space, in our city space, by moving that path, keeping the wall, moving your wall back, which also gives you more developable land. And you've got two very small lots on this end, on the east side, that are tough to build on. I've tried. I've jiggled and juggled on those kind of lots. It's really hard to build on. And then on the other end, you're heading toward what is now the next shore view. And that's another fence and a gate. So you've kind of hemmed that in. So I think there's a real easy solution. It's all design-based.
So I agree with you 100%. The issue with that is there's code requirements of those green spaces have to be a certain distance from each other,
Okay.
from the end.
I think we might give on that one if we don't cross public to private. Because I
So-
think we're walking on real tough
Again,
cross.
part of our proposal was we didn't want to be asking for anything where it'd be reason for denial. So
We deny you on that.
that would be something that we're totally open to, but we would have to have the planning department have to be in agreement with that to allow it. If they're okay with it, it makes complete sense to me.
I would love to take that out of the mix, that
So
crossover.
Commissioner Fleming, I had the same thought, but then it occurred to me that that would compromise the view corridors, right? Because those two, so it's trade-offs, right? So do we
Yeah, or
want
it's a
to,
fence that's not totally site obscuring. That's the other thing is you can do.
but those would be replaced by by lots, residential lots. So we would gain on the public access and accessibility and parking, but it would probably mean compromising on the view corridor unless you can get around that.
We've talked a lot about this view corridor issue over the years. And the view corridor issues, although there is no standard for those, if you logically think about a view corridor, looking down through the middle of an apartment building, in between houses, it's all landscaped. It's landscaped. We want to do a good job landscaping, so we're going to put trees, flowering trees, deciduous, evergreens, everything else. So the kind of the oxymoronic part about that view corridor is, so when my trees get big and they shield the buildings, so you can't see the buildings anymore, it's going to block your view. So are you going to have me going with a chainsaw and cut those trees down so it opens up the view corridor and you can see all the buildings again, which is exactly what you don't want because you want to be from Celtice, not to see the buildings. So it's like it sounds good to have a view corridor, but realistically, in 20 years, it's going to be gone. It's going to be grown up unless you have me go out with a chainsaw and cut all the trees down, which I think you even have a forester on staff to prevent people from cutting trees down. So it's like,
Yeah, that's
I'm
not,
not
that's-
disagreeing. I
that's
just-
not much of a view corridor. That's a view shot. You know, it's.
Like you're
yeah.
driving by for 2 seconds and you get a flash down the, but I was having the same thought about
Yeah, the gates
consolidating
and
and
the-
moving where the public access is closer to other
That's
places.
like a no-no. Yeah. If you're
Makes
going to
sense.
gate this community, you really need to respect that. I mean, you're trying to sell a theorem, so I think you got to keep the general public from flowing into what is a very private community. And it's counter to what you're trying to sell.
One more. if
Well,
I
let
could.
me, given this topic of changing the view corridor, how would that have to be handled at this point in time? Let's say this gets approved this evening with these two patches being the access points, and we say, well, gee, let's move those to the ends of the property if that's feasible to do. What happens here to the applicant at this point in time for that?
So the applicant was correct. I mean, we could make that decision this evening, and it could be a request as part of the PUD and the subdivision to deviate from the code. The challenges staff has with doing that is it would have to be equivalent sizes, parcel sizes, would kind of, make sure that the open space doesn't get compromised. But the other challenge is on the far west end, Harbs has their easement. And so I don't know that we have any agreement from them that if you put them on the two ends, that location could be, and it makes sense, but, we don't have that agreement. And then the view corridors, Lance is correct in that the code isn't super specific. The agreement, the annexation agreement that's in place, though, does say that they need to be from the public right-of-way, which is from Celtice Way, so that, you could potentially have view corridors on the two far ends if we made sure that there weren't obstructions, carports along Celtice Way, or the wall there was a break in that. But we do have potential challenge of the other two items.
Given that, Lance, I don't know how you feel about that, because at that point, where would we go with this evening? Approval, not approval? The applicant's got to wait, come back. I don't know what their timeline is. Hold on, Pete. Yeah.
There could be a condition, we could say something, if feasible, and then through the preliminary plat could change as the final plat. So if we could work through some of those logistics, we could determine if we have a condition added, something we could work through.
I think the Harbs issue
Go ahead, Lance.
is a non-issue, because they have an easement across property that I own.
Okay.
So I can sell that property, I can develop the property. I can't put a building on the property, I can't put a carport, I can't put permanent structures, but you can put a park on the property, you can put grass on the property, you can do access on the property. I still own it. And so just because they have an easement doesn't give them the right to dictate to me
Okay.
anything other than I can't put a permanent structure on there.
Okay. I follow you. All right. Well, I just wanted to bring that out. John had a question. Go ahead.
Well, bear with me here a little bit. We beat you up a little bit on this public access, because I'm just trying to understand, and I'm sharing that's what I'm wrestling with here, and understand there's aspects of the previous proposal that I really liked. The strip along the waterfront, but I understand. You got shot down, and we said the density was too high. So, well, in fairness, we kind of beat you up a little bit on the public access, and I don't know where we land on that. But help me understand. I think the positives in this versus the previous proposal. Excuse me. And I didn't hear this as strongly as I thought you were going to present in your presentation. But correct me if I'm wrong, but the original proposal was going to be somewhere around 850 units, something like that?
Correct. It came before you as 850, correct?
And now we're at 278.
If you count the single family with the multifamily, yes, 278.
So in density, that's a positive. This went over.
There's a caveat on that, because the 850 that we had became 680. When it went to city council, it got
Gotcha.
reduced down.
Understand.
And then that included the 130 units that are on the old Stimson office site that I have a special use permit for, because at that time, the city was a co-applicant with me, and we were doing a land swap as part of that project. So I was ending up with the railroad right-of-way, and so it's not 278, it'd be 408.
So again, what I'm trying to do
less.
is be fair here. I maybe don't see as strong a public waterfront access as I maybe like to see, but I'm trying to make sure I understand the positives, if you will, this proposal versus the previous one. And as we had a lot of criticism on the previous one on density, this is a lot less, 278.
Yes.
Than the other iterations. Traffic, I thought you would elaborate on that a lot more. In the previous presentation, previous proposals, we had a lot of dialogue on the traffic. This one that we're looking at right here would be markedly less than previous proposals, correct?
Yes. I didn't cover the traffic a lot, because traffic actually, contrary to what the testimony was, Chris Bosley your guys' own engineer did a traffic study with Welch Comer, and it showed that we didn't have a negative impact on any of the intersections with our 850 units. And actually, that's less than what we could do if C-17 zone, if you actually developed it as a commercial, which 22 acres, you could do a Walmart up there, you can do a superstore, and have way more than 850 units would generate. So I didn't touch on the traffic this time, because last time, from a factual standpoint, traffic is not an issue.
So it wasn't an issue, but it's even less of an issue than not being an issue.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
I understand.
Not an issue.
And the last thing I want to understand is, We had a lot of discussion, like schools on the last time, and I see a letter here. I don't know if you've seen the same
Yes.
letter from the school district. I think they're saying there's something like just a handful of kids or something like that.
Right, and even the letter that we had at city council, when we had 680, the school district's letter, it was a 2-page letter, it was read into the, begrudgingly read, I might add, into the record by Chris Tyneson, or was it Mike Ridley? I think it was Chris. Anyway, even on that one, the school district says that they could handle any additional kids created by that project when we had 680 units on the site. So they submitted another letter in, I think yesterday, and it's the same thing. They can handle any kids generated from the site.
Okay.
Thank you.
Peter, go ahead.
A couple of things. I think your question earlier was a little premature. It's what four of us decide here sort of directs whether, he directs whether we can do something or not. I don't disagree with it, it's just the timing. The other is, in all due respect to fellow Commissioner Ingalls, I don't view us disagreeing as beating one another up. I view it as maybe we're agreeing, maybe we're disagreeing, and we'll come to some position, but it's not a person a winner, a person a loser, somebody beaten up, a beaty and a beator. Now,
Poor choice of words. Sorry.
well, then I'm sorry, John, but I'm saying that for my benefit more than yours.
No, well said.
Then you'd mentioned where you have the property in Belle Reve where people can't gate you out.
Correct.
Are we gating people, the people that use the access, are we gating them out?
No, because they have public access through bicycles and they have pedestrian. The easement I have from the Belle Reve Homeowners Association is for vehicular access.
So we're
So there's a
gating out the vehicles, but we're not gating out individuals.
I'm not gating out the public, which is what was required of me to
Great.
provide.
So how do you not, there's gates there, are there sidewalks then that go around the gates?
Yes.
Very good. Okay, then I have a very difficult time with a wall. I believe that it wrecks a view corridor. I believe it's terrible. I don't know, I watch Tour de France. You watch those bikers go, and they got walls, and it's you don't get to see much from bike. And this trail here is for public use and view of the water and so forth. I believe the city has provisions, at least in some areas, and I don't know if I think it'll be transferable to others, that you have view fences on East Lakeshore Drive. There are conditions there that you have to be able to view X amount through the fence. Now, I prefer not to have any fence, any gates, any walls, but I certainly think it would be appropriate to have the visibility to view things along this area as you do on East Lakeshore Drive as prescribed by the city. And I think, is Mr. Whipple going to talk? But I assume he is.
Yes.
But I've got a question of you, because you're here, is on this one-page subdivision information. It's page 6, but I can read it to you. It says, as no building permits for the structures on these proposed lots are being requested at this time, we expect to codify many of the shoreline code requirements as restrictions. But my issue is many. Why not all?
That would be a better question I don't have
Well,
that in front of me.
that question's going to come up, but you'll.
We'll comply with all of the requirements that we have to within the
And
shoreline
that's
ordinance
all I
area.
want to hear is all.
Oh,
Very good.
Yeah, I mean, we have to.
Very good. Thank you.
Sure.
I have no more questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, no problem. Go ahead, Mike.
I have a quick question. So I've been doing the math while everyone's been talking, and to follow up on Commissioner Fleming's comment about if that's a possibility of moving the green spaces off to the ends, of course, lining up with the parking for the storage unit, and then correspondingly on the east portion, lining up with the parking actually gives you a lot more viewability all the way from Celtice without any interruption at all. But the current proposed tract A and B for the green space totals 24,046.45 square feet, And then if they were to move out to the plots as drawn up, that equals 22,711.69, which is a difference of only 1,334.76 square feet. So I guess my question is, if all of this were to lead to a decision where we say we can work through getting things pushed out, can you, because I'm sure it's got to meet that 10% open space requirement.
Correct.
In order for it to be identical to the proposed 24,000 plus, it would need to, you need to come back
Yeah, that's fine.
with 1,300 square feet.
No, we just make them same size.
Yeah.
That's agreeable.
Okay, I just wanted to.
I think that would be up to staff to say, all right, we're not meeting the 10% or some consideration or something
Right,
like
and I don't
that.
know if the 24,046.45 is actually 10.01% or whatever, so I don't know. if there's any-
Right, it would need to meet the 10%, so we could work through that. One other thing we were kind of talking through back here was part of the reason the subdivision code is written that way too, for that spacing of the tracks, I believe, was also fire department access, so we would have to work through that with them as well. I think part of it's for emergency response, and then in the case, I know you're not proposing docks, but I think it's also for if there were docks in the future, any of the waterfront properties have to have kind of that spacing, so we'd have to work through it. But if we wrote a condition that we could kind of work through for the feasibility. Another thing staff was saying too, it would probably make more sense to put all the open space on the far east side instead of putting some on the west side, because you're next to a gated community and south of the mini storage, and then you're close enough to Mill River where there's kind of that parkland. So it seems like it would be more functional if it was all grouped. On the one end, if we can get through the other logistics.
So there's a number of things which still need to be worked out, let's say. And when it comes down to our decision of making this with our findings and stuff, can there be a condition directed to what we just talked about? Yes, the property for open space needs to be at this end or that end. So there can be a condition on that.
Yes.
And if we put that condition on there, and for some reason the discussion doesn't end up with that particular property being at one location, what happens? Does it go back to the plan that we have in front of us, or does the applicant have to come back to us and go through this again?
So yes, so it would basically, they'd have to kind of work through with us. If we can't make it work for the proposed condition, then they would come back with this or something very similar, go through the final plat process, and then they submit the final development plan, which is required for the PUD. So.
Okay, so I want to make sure we understand that as commissioners. If we say, oh, here's a condition, it doesn't necessarily mean if the applicant and staff can't come to an agreement, then the applicant would have to come back. So I want to make sure everybody understands what might happen.
Can we have
If
a
they
condition?
can't meet the condition, then it fails. So
I
you have to,
just-
just
I'm
like
just-
anything else.
But I'm bringing that out so everybody understands exactly what's happening and not assuming something. So,
But could it be approved with the way that it's proposed now, and the condition being, if allowed by other departments, that the access points would either be on the east end, west end of similar same size or greater than they currently are, and not come back through the same process again? 'Cause
Correct.
the way it is right now, I understand Commissioner Fleming's concerns, and she's correct, but it complies with all the codes now, with the fire and access and all that. And really, the fire issue is if there are docks, which we're not proposing, but I understand what you're saying. So I would propose that you vote on the one that's in front of you with the caveat that if we get agreement from everybody to go to the outside, I would prefer that too. But I don't want that to be the approval and then get hamstrung back into this process.
right. And that's what I'm trying to
Seventh
bring here, so you understand and delay your project moving forward and coming back and doing all this. But if I'm hearing staff correctly, they would like the two parcels, and I kind of like what staff is saying, get them to be one parcel for open space at a much better location at the far end. And
And then still address the view corridors,
Okay.
and we can kind of work
so
through
you've got an
that.
inclination where staff is kind of leaning towards, kind of what the commissioners might be saying, but I want to make sure that it doesn't affect you so much that you've got to come back here again. I just want to make sure everybody understands what we're
Mr.
talking
Chairman,
about.
it
Yes,
seems
go
that
ahead.
We've talked about this, moving this open space here in a more permanent nature, and I think we should right at a time. One thing we're missing is whose property is that immediately to the east? Is that not the city or Ignite CDA property?
The Atlas.
Yes, I don't know.
We-
That's, yeah.
It's Atlas.
Yes, that's Atlas
Atlas.
Mountain.
And so we do not know what is in the plan for the open space there. So we're sitting here and saying, well, the open space should be moved from A to B. Should we not know where that other open space is before we do that? And I think it's premature to talk about moving the space, and I
We're
understand. what
not
you're saying.
showing open space there.
We're
We're
not
showing
showing.
it on the east side of the, no, Atlas's east
Well,
side.
we're looking at
Again.
the entire picture in some fashion.
But we
and
don't
we
have
see
green
that
space
now.
there. We don't. Right now, we
Well,
don't.
I think we're at the point where we're having a discussion right now. We still have the applicant in front of us. So
right.
You're
let's,
right, Mr. Chair.
I just wanted to bring this all out so we can have a good discussion later. So let the applicant finish his presentation. I'll call the rest of the people who signed up so they have a chance to speak, before we run really, really late, and we'll see where we go.
Okay, that wraps it up for me, unless
Thank you.
you'd like to reserve
Anything
some
else
time
for
for
Lance?
rebuttal. And
Well, he'll get another chance. will
Oh,
he not?
yeah.
He'll
Right,
get back,
fast
come
public
up,
will-
if
he'll
he
speak.
wants to
Right.
come back and
If he-
face us
well,
again.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Todd Whipple? Just state your name and I'll swear you in.
Todd Whipple,
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, you got
Um,
a few
I've
minutes to
got-
speak.
So I have.
Yeah, we got about 5 minutes here or so.
Sure.
So,
So,
the
I,
applicant.
Oh, wow.
it's smaller than the last time I was here, but
Thank you.
we've ordered the presentation differently. So I'm gonna try to just go through it a little different because I thought there was some
Okay,
good progress that I don't wanna
See the same.
throw a damp cloth on. So there was a question, some of this is reiteration. I think we, on our side, are always prompted to tell you what we're gonna tell you, then we tell you, and then we tell you what we told you, so that you remember everything that we tell you, hopefully. There was a conversation just recently about, this is the city's Atlas Mill site and our new proposal. This is kind of a rehash of the original drawing, but this is just to kind of show you the current proposal on your property. Now, it's what you have kind of been working towards. There's no definite plan. But just to kind of reiterate some of the things that, on here that are not, I think, clear to everybody. I think the first thing is just to kind of highlight some of the things that were talked about. We don't really have any access here to Mill River at all on the west end. We've got some sewer connectivity that we have to keep. We have to maintain that. So we'll always have some kind of an access road here. Even if we move the open space to the far end, we'll have access over the sewer line that we have to extend to the Atlas Mill site, because the Atlas Mill site needs to obtain sewer through this property. We also have that same thing on the east end where we're running a sewer line onto the city's property. So somewhere along the line, that'll have to be accommodated by a minor modification on the city's property. So either the open space is here or on the ends or in the middles, whatever the conversation was. I think those things can be accommodated. I think the other thing too is to remember that there is a shared access here kind of in the middle. It goes along with that drawing that happened at the annexation that Veritas came up with, where at one point, if you remember, Atlas was supposed to be a big signalized intersection and all points were supposed to end at it. Now it's a big roundabout. So from that perspective, we've maintained that connectivity. I think we've gone over the site plan. Unless you have any questions, I'll just kind of let you interrupt me as we go if you want, if that's easier. We've kind of done that. This is just the phases as we went through it. A little bit of a clarification. I think Mike covered this really well. Thought he had a great staff report as it related to the amenities and access. One of the things I think Lance clarified was that, and I think Mike stated it, was that the intent for the gates was to have vehicular prohibition on the gates only for control, but that the sidewalks with the public use easements on them all the way from Celtice all the way down to the trail and then to the open spaces would be open. They would just be actually the wall wouldn't get that far. There would just be a larger opening there. This is a different map than what was shown that Lance had. It's the exact same thing. It's a little different layout. In the Vertis drawings as a part of the annexation, you'll notice that the connectivity, we've tried to match it. We didn't have connectivity at that point. I think Veritas and the city assumed that there'd be no connectivity east and west, other than that access to Atlas, which is what we've continued to propose. My presentation has the annexation agreement in it, which is why we're here. The annexation agreement, as you all know, required us to do a PUD and a subdivision, so we're fulfilling that requirement. As it relates to these view corridors, these view corridors, if you notice on this drawing, you can see the pedestrian access down here to the trail and then the trail down to the public right-of-ways. But the access corridors are set up, and buildings are actually, things were moved around specifically to make the access corridors and the view corridors work so that we took advantage of those public open spaces. Now, I think we can probably move the view corridors over here to this side and the view corridors over to this side if we were to move those open spaces to the east and the west and still make the view corridors work as a requirement. We could demonstrate that to staff as we move through it if that's one of the conditions of approval that you guys wanted to incorporate. As it relates to the PUD, I'm not going to go through. Our job is to kind of, again, do what staff does and either agree or disagree. I think that we agree, generally, I think, all the way across all the different findings from B8A all the way to B8E or G, whichever it is. We call out a few more things than Mike does, but for the most part, as it relates to all the findings, I think overall you'll find that on B8A, we are in conformance with the comprehensive plan, goals 1 through 4. We're allowed to have the density that we proposed. Our R12 is where it needs to be. We've provided open space, parks, and pedestrian connections, and public spaces are provided. Some of these things are just reiterations of what were in the annexation agreement as well. We believe that the site is compatible with existing uses. We've got our mini storage over here next to the existing U.S. Bank call center. We've got single family next to single family. Our single family diminishes so that it matches in with the future Atlas Mill site. And then we have our multifamily kind of adjacent to the back of the commercial property on the Atlas Mill site. We talk about the view corridors a little bit. I went through that. There's a 30-foot drop in elevation. Our buildings are 45 feet tall, as allowed in the C17 or the R17 zone, I'm sorry. And so we've tried real hard to make sure that we've maintained view corridors and we've moved buildings apart farther than we would normally to make sure we had those view corridors. We also talk a little bit about the natural features, which is in the R12, we're going to keep the 40-foot setback requirement. Lance talked about that. Everything inside the 150-foot shoreline requirements will be met, the 30-foot height of the buildings, et cetera. We provided the two 60-foot open space tracks that have to be a minimum of 600 feet apart. I think if you guys were to change those, the grill in the room is going to be fire. Will they allow it to be farther apart? I don't think we have a problem. I think it's a fire department requirement. It has to do with hose length and things like that. B8D, again, I think staff is pretty much, including fire, schools, and everybody has pretty much said everything's available to the site. The Atlas Mill site needs sewer through us eventually if you guys are ever gonna develop it, you have to have sewer. That comes through our property. Right now there's no easement other than you guys do own that property, your current railroad property. B8E, I do think that we meet all the requirements for public and common open space. If we have some round off error, we'll be sure to correct that if that's exactly what it is. Off-street parking is sufficient. The plan that we proposed has a 29-foot asphalt pavement surface. The roadway, the private road in front of the lots in the R12 is 29 feet wide. And the reason that we've got it that wide is we sat through the gate conversation and we realized that part of their problem was their road's too narrow. And so what we've done is we've made it wide enough so we could have parking on one side and still have our 20 feet required for fire to pass. And so the other thing that we heard at that hearing when they were coming back requesting a gate was they didn't get a gate in the beginning, therefore they couldn't keep people off their roadway. Even though it was a private road, they couldn't keep people off. And so we are asking for that right out of the chute. That way we can maintain traffic during construction, because a lot of the issues that we heard during that gate meeting had to do construction related. You can't have 5 construction vehicles working on a brand new house and still get cars by and people parking and people trying to access the public open space associated with it. And then I think Mike covered this real well. B8G really is a an agreement between us and the city that we'll go ahead and work with the city and our CCNRs and our homeowners associations at time of final plat. The PUD plans are in your packet. There are several sets of plans. We've got our private road sections and plans that call out different things. We've got a utility plan, things that are required as a part of the application. And then just a recap of the findings again. We believe that we meet all the above criteria, and hopefully when you guys get around to deliberating after everybody's talked, you agree with us and we'll approve the PUD. Then the next thing is a subdivision. I must be missing a slide. So there's several findings. Again, we kind of agree with what staff has said. Sidewalks available, compatible with existing uses, all the same and different things. Most of the same items, a couple new things that we added that were in the staff's presentation. I'm not going to read them all. They're attached in those little tiny slides that I gave you this time to save on paper. But again, as far as the subdivision, everything that we've done, I think Lance covered it as it related to these two projects, were to kind of follow the letter of the law, follow the annexation agreement, follow your code to the letter so that we didn't have to ask for things. We kind of monitor the city's activity and we see other PUDs and, we're not asking for any setback changes. We're not asking for any height changes. We're not asking for any variances associated with anything else associated with the project. We're just trying to go straight down the line and bring a project that meets all the criteria that makes it easier for you to approve, makes it easier for us to ask for approval, and hopefully we'll be able to get there. You should have gotten all these plans. This is our landscape plan package. This is where we talk about a lot of the open space. Things are going to mean the open space, the view corridors. This is building envelope plans, phasing, kind of all the cool stuff that everybody wants to see that as the engineer, I don't really do this, our landscape architect group does it. Again, some of the same pictures, our elevations, we are going to maintain, since we're in the R17, we'll keep the 45-foot building height. Again, the elevations associated, all the same things from Mike's proposal, and then in here is a copy of a little bit of the traffic study. I think this is this is what current zoning would allow. Sorry, this is not what our proposal is. I looked at it going, wow, we're going to have 1,000 cars in the PMP. Isn't that going to be cool for 250 residents? I'm not so sure what we're going to be doing down there. But, so this is a leftover slide, so if I got quiet, I'm sorry. This is really the one that we're dealing with. How many cars we're going to generate, 176 in the PM as a total in and out. 2,166, which is less than the allowed of almost 10,000 based on the zoning. I think we went over all that last time. And I think Chris Bosley, in one of his notes in the staff report, basically says, well, it's the 870 was okay, the 680 was okay, so the 252 or the 250 is going to be okay just by inspection. I think that's just going back to the Welch-Comer study that was done on the city's behalf as the city's engineer. And so I think from that perspective, we're not saying that we're not putting cars on the road, and we're not saying we're not going to have any kind of an impact. We're just going to say that the system as a whole will handle the vehicles as that generated. Other than that, and I have a lot of other slides in case we need to get into the weeds. Hopefully we won't. And I will slow down there and ask for any questions.
I have one question. Again, it goes back to our requirements that we're asking for special conditions. And Lance mentioned that you will not be constructing docks, but these people will be constructing docks. The owners will construct docks. And we have a .4, if docks are to be constructed, which is a oxymoron because they will be, the fire department will require access to the docks, including a standpipe system. So if your development isn't handling that, do you then write that into the HOA and notify all the homeowners that somehow that has to be taken care of? Because there's kind of a disconnect here.
Correct. I think the intent has always been that we would prepare appropriately for docks in the case that they're built, and that would be included, but we're not going to permit the docks. We just felt that it was easier for us to meet everything in your code. Docks aren't specifically allowed or required in your code. It's through, the Department of Lands. And so we just said, you know what? We'll set it up, and when the people want to go to lands and make their applications, the standpipe will be back there, so in case fire has to fight a fire on the dock, it'll be there for them.
So we need to say this differently. We need to say, for the provision of future dock construction, we need to require that adequate standpipes are positioned and located by you.
Correct, that would be an
Okay,
appropriate
that's the
condition.
verbiage we need, not
Correct.
if, because
Yes,
the
ma'am.
reality is they will get
I
billed.
agree with that. then,
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thanks.
But if that language isn't put in, they would be,
We need to.
they would be precluded to building the docks, right? Because they couldn't have fire protection.
Well, they could
the
come back
homeowners
on
would
their own
dictate.
volition and install the standpipe. It's gonna be a private road. They could go to the association and dig up the road and put the standpipes in for their dock, so it
do
wouldn't
have two
preclude it.
questions.
Yeah.
First of all, is the decision up to us where the trail is located, whether it's on the applicant's property or the city's property?
I would say it's not up to Planning Commission. I think Planning Commission can make a recommendation where you'd like to see it placed. I think the annexation agreement, if we follow the annexation agreement, wording says that the applicant shall put a path on his property, but can, through approval by somebody else, whether it's a private landowner or the city, locate it somewhere else.
So if we're silent on it, it'll be on his property, on the applicant's property.
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, it would just seem to me to be
He could leave it
silly
there,
for
or
us
he
to
might
put it
come
on our
back and
property.
work with.
You know, if
They're
it's
gonna
on-
build it.
I
We're
know,
building
but
it, so
that's
We
we,
have
right,
to
but
construct it.
We
Either way.
we want more space for parking and whatnot.
so you could, I think, make a recommendation that the planning commission believes it would be in the public's best interest to have the trail located in the city property.
So
And then we can work with, because then that would help in the approval process if there's any additional approval process required, except for Parks saying we want it in the public, oh, here we go, I got touched.
We already have permission.
I know. We have permission.
We already have permission to put the trail.
You want us,
in
you
the
want to take a
right
few
of way.
minutes, you want to have a few minutes of discussion?
Sorry.
No, they have permission, What we might do is
Correct.
recommend
We
that
have
they put it
permission
into
from-
our land.
Mr. Douglas, I didn't mean for you to go. I just meant if you wanted to talk a
Yeah,
little
you can
bit,
cut
then
me
come
off.
back. You know,
No, he'll have a chance to address that later when he comes back if he'd like to, but,
And
yeah.
secondly, what I raised earlier on page 6, where you said that many of the shoreline code requirements will be met.
Let me
First paragraph, third line up, from the first paragraph, second line up.
I think the intent, that was basically to say that when we get to plating, how many things do we need to put on the plat, or do we just allow staff to condition it every time there's a building permit? That's all that was intended to say. Sometimes when we write plats, when we get to the wording section, and what we're gonna, this tract is for this, and this is for this, and this is for this, and those houses that are within, between the 40 and 150 feet, you can do this. That's all we were saying is.
So really, instead of many, it's all.
Oh, correct.
Very good. Thank you.
okay. Thank you for being concise in your presentation, Todd.
Sure.
Appreciate it. I have Ryan Anrad, did not wish to speak. Ed Lawson, did not wish to speak. And if anyone does wish to speak, and I'm mentioning that they did not indicate that they wanted to speak, just please come up. Roger Smith, and you do want to speak. Come on up, Roger. State your name, and I'll swear you in, Roger.
Okay, my name is Roger Smith.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You have 5
Thank
minutes.
you.
Thank you, Roger.
I do have a PowerPoint, a few PowerPoint slides, and I am here representing We the People of Coeur d'Alene Group. I hope I could have a few extra minutes for that. It's not a long presentation, but certainly at least 5 or 6
All right,
minutes.
let's see where we go.
Okay.
Go ahead, Roger. Thank you.
I think the seed I want to plant tonight is that this is a very, very major decision for the city of Coeur d'Alene. We're here tonight not for a run-of-the-mill approval by planning commission. Does it check all the boxes and the codes and things? You're here tonight to make a decision that will affect Coeur d'Alene for many, many, many years. It's a once-in-a-lifetime, once-and-forever type decision. And the test I would use is, are you going to be proud of what is approved here in this process? You're going to be proud to have your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren say, boy, my old relative did a great thing and got some nice things on this riverfront. So that's the tone I'd like to approach this with. There's a little bit of history. In 2015, the first River's Edge proposal came in with 28 homes, very much like what is being proposed today. It was rejected by staff as not being in compliance with the 2013 annexation agreement. So a very similar project. It has been tweaked and changed some, but same 28 homes on the river. In 2018, as was mentioned, the
Roger,
proposed...
can I interrupt you on that? When you say that the 2013 agreement, it was not in compliance with that, do you have any history on why it was not in compliance?
There's a letter from the city that was sent back to the applicant that cited the reasons why it wasn't in compliance with the annexation agreement. Yeah. So that's all well documented.
But you don't have anything
Well, I
that
think
you're presenting to us saying it was not in compliance at this point. You're just telling us it
I'm
wasn't.
trying to remember. I think there was public access involved, open views, things that were required in the annexation agreement that didn't seem to be complied with in that earlier application.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but it is all there in a city letter. In 2018, 680 apartments was what it boiled down to when it finally was appealed to council. That was denied by the council on appeal, and as was mentioned, a reconsideration is now in progress. Today, the proposal is for 28 homes on the river, 250 apartments and storage units, no trail along the riverfront. Yes, the comprehensive plan is the biggie here. Complying with the comprehensive plan is the number one thing that has to happen, like any project that comes through the city process. But stacked onto that are several other rules and criteria that apply because of this very special riverfront location. The shoreline overlay regulations, the 2013 annexation agreement, the city council resolution back in 2014 about riverfront and protecting riverfront, actually acquiring riverfront. There's a lot of extra layers of scrutiny that should go into this particular project on this particular parcel.
And I hate to interrupt you again, but I'll give you more time. I want to ask staff, bringing up the 2013 annexation, does that have anything to do with this particular presentation or?
So yes, so the 2013 annexation agreement, you have copies before you, and so
Okay.
that's what the current proposal this evening, the applicant has worked hard to make sure that what they've submitted does meet the code and the annexation agreement. So
Right,
the
so that has some
2013,
relevance to this.
that one is an existing
Okay.
agreement.
And we also confirmed that it meets the shoreline regulations, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I'm sorry to interrupt again, but I
I
just
think
wanted
the
to
applicant has confirmed that.
Okay, go ahead, Roger.
I might want to clarify that.
Thank you.
Under the comprehensive plan, there's a laundry list of things that have to be met. You saw most of them. The things I've underlined are the things that we feel could be better addressed in this project. For instance, public access to the river, as we've talked about. Open spaces, parks, public spaces, pet and bike access, especially adjacent to the river. A quote directly from the comprehensive plan. Adjacent to the river, in my mind, means along the river, not 100 feet back from the river. Behind a row of homes. So especially adjacent to the river, those amenities and public amenities that were put in place long ways ago, back in the old comprehensive plan, 2007, I believe, were very wisely done. They were stacked on there to make sure this special parcel was protected. So a lot of the things we've already been talking about. Let's look at the shoreline regulations for a minute. Shoreline regulations, which are rules that apply within 150 feet of the lake or river, to protect, preserve, and enhance visual resources. Again, that visual element comes in. And public access, again, public access to the shoreline by establishing limitations and restrictions on specifically defined shoreline property. This is a specifically defined and special shoreline property. So public access, visual resources, not view corridors. That corridor where it doesn't come up in the city code, it's open views, public views, wording like that. The view corridor has come into play as we look at the drawings, and yes, it is a corridor. We also have the 2013 annexation agreement, which required a master plan as a PUD. My understanding was that PUD applied to all of the annexed property, not just the rear portion, that even the subdivision portion should be part of a master plan and PUD. So there's some clarification needed there, I think. But again, public access, the key words, public access to the river, bicycle, pedestrian trails, open views, quote unquote, from the annex agreement, not view corridors, open views. Very important things that keep stacking up and appearing in each one of these layers of control that is put on this very special property. And finally, the City Council's resolution in 2014 was kind of drafted with these mill site properties in mind. That the discussion around what we're going to do with the mill sites and what public value can we get sort of led to this resolution 14049, which the goal of which was public acquisition, protection, and comprehensive planning for the riverfront areas. Actually, it led to the city purchasing the Atlas Mill site, right, the adjacent site. So in our alternate plan that we proposed, and it is a letter in your packet, we did include things that we thought was a win-win, things the city wanted and as it had expressed, things the developer we thought would be okay with. Those things are certainly up for argument. But we did retain the trail along the river, the R12 homes on the river, but the trail would go in front of the homes, public trail on the riverfront, not 100 feet back behind the homes. Retain some river run improvements and amenities. When the public access to the river, we dead end at a mud bank. There's no deck, there's no beach area, there's no concrete steps, there's no public amenities for public benefit other than a view of the river. And I've call attention to other cities like Bend, my hometown in Michigan, which is on a lake, other states, Minnesota. A lot of things have things that end at the water with small platforms, docks, decks, railings, tie-ups for kayaks. Those amenities should be considered as part of the public access points. Just a couple of quick words on traffic. Traffic is still a major concern of our group. I tried to get across Northwest today at 5 o'clock, couldn't do it. Major development of any kind down there is going to create traffic. The city engineer's report only addressed the traffic impacts on Celtice Way. It did not express concerns about Northwest Boulevard. The traffic study that was done, the engineering traffic study that was done, cited 3 or 4 intersections on Northwest Boulevard that are already at level E or F level of service. In other words, that's the lowest you can go. So we have 3 or 4 intersections on Northwest Boulevard already at level of service E or F. So to accommodate the traffic from major development down there is going to take some creative thinking. And the other one, schools, I think the letter about the schools was a bit misrepresented, and I think that's in your packet. I would advise that you read that. And doesn't paint quite a rosy picture of that we have all this room for new students. So,
Roger, how do you say it's misleading? Give me why you say that.
On the school thing? And
yeah, I mean, it's a straight-out letter that says the school says they have no objection to this particular development. Why does your organization, you representing your organization, say it's misleading?
Yeah, I think one of our members is going to speak to that in a minute, but the original letter painted a very dim and dreary picture of the school capacity problem.
Well, I'm talking about this letter we have in our package today.
I think it only addressed the change and the reduction from, this was for the original project, remember?
I'm talking about tonight, what we're talking about, this hearing, this letter that I have in my package, all our commissioners have in this package. The school says this project is okay, but you stand in front of us saying it's misleading. I would like to know why.
Well, I think the letter.
And if you're not the person to address that, and the other person is, I'll let that person address it.
Somebody else address it.
Okay,
That's
thank
fine.
you.
But I do believe that's the case. Okay, thank you for your time, and thank you for the extra time.
Thank you, Roger.
I have a question.
Go right ahead.
We'll see legal counsel. So the annexation agreement requires a PUD,
Yes.
and that agreement, is this a PUD that we're looking at for all the property, including the places that are going to stand pipes and future docks?
Yes.
Very good, thank you.
I kept hearing in the presentation that the PUD was only for the non-waterfront area. It didn't include the R12 subdivision.
It's for the full property.
It's for the full property.
So we can, in PUD, we talk about accessibility, we talk about usage, so we could talk about moving the trail, couldn't we?
I think, yeah, the discussion that came up before, if you want to make a recommendation of where you'd like to see it.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate
I
it.
might add that the PUD went on to say, or the annexation agreement said that that PUD had to be approved by the city. It gave the city a lot of power in how these annexed properties were going to end up. So I think you do have a lot of power there.
All right, thank you, Roger, appreciate it. Terry Gobat, Terry?
Let's see, could I get a
Just,
overall plot plan from somebody just to
just
put up?
state your name and I'll swear you in, Terry.
Terry Godbout?
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You got a couple of minutes, thank you.
Okay, I had about 10 points. I've subtracted 8 and added 3 or something based on discussions here. Most of this has been pretty well covered.
Oh,
First of all,
okay, thank you.
Pardon me?
No, I said
Oh,
okay, if it's been covered
I think
already.
the most important thing that's come to light here is that the gates here and here will keep the city and the public from accessing all of this city property through here. And I think the gates should be moved to the entry into the developer's property here and here. So just throw that out there. I have a question. I don't understand this business of how we have on C-17, R-17, a lot of confusion, or at least I do. We have a density of 17 units. If it's R-17, 17 housing units per acre. Okay, so here we have C-17. I thought I heard someone say we're going to go with the R-17 rules if we do that. And so we have so many acres, and all of a sudden we have all the property is included. The developer puts up 250 units, and then when it's all said and done, he also throws up 391 two-story storage units. Now, doesn't that affect the density? That just seems horribly not logical to me, but.
Staff, you want to address that, please, so we can get clarification on that?
The property is one lot to the north, and that consists of 14 acres. And at 14 acres, at 17 units per acre, you're allowed to do that density, and regardless if it's a mixed-use development. Like if you had a commercial development on the first floor and units above. Oh, sorry, and units above, then you'd be able to do the density based on the lot, the 14 acres. And then he's just allowed to do both a mixed-use development.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
okay, again, he could, he can do that many units, but oh, by the way, he gets a bonus, a 391 storage units? That,
It's a use, so that's not considered residential units, because it's
Okay.
storage units. So it's, yeah, and PUDs were able to do that, where you can kind of move the density around if it's the same lot.
yeah.
So
right,
it's,
well, those
it
are
is
the rules.
kosher.
Okay.
We've done that in other projects.
I want to give Lance credit. He met with Roger and I for 2 hours. There's a lot of give and take. I think he probably understood better where we're coming from, and we certainly understood better where he's coming from. The school thing, I was prepared to speak on that, but I was not aware that there was a new letter in the packet today, so I can't speak to it.
Oh, were you the gentleman that,
Was supposed
that
to
Roger
speak to
was
it? Yeah,
referred to? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
okay. Any
Right.
questions for me?
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Okay.
Elaine Price wishes to speak. Just state your name and I'll swear you in.
Elaine Price.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Go ahead.
First of all, I like to say that it sounds like he's trying to do things and not asking the city for anything. So that's a big difference compared to what he was doing in the past. I do have a concern about traffic, because when you think about 2,166 trips. If that was my commute to work, that would definitely impact me. And I feel like they're trying to downplay it by saying peak hours versus, what that actually is gonna. So I think even though it's less, still, if 2,166 people enter the road, that would affect my commute, that's for sure. And the other thing that I wanted to point out on page 8 of the River's Edge PUD and subdivision, it talks about heights being 20 to 50 feet tall, and I thought that it was 45. So I'm not sure if that's part of it, but I think that should be addressed.
What page is that again? I'm sorry.
Page 8
Yeah, it does have 50.
of the River's Edge
He said
PUD and
45.
subdivision.
Yeah. Drawing's
So
45.
so,
We assume that they're going with 45.
Okay.
Yeah, that's old. Yeah.
okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Good catch.
All right, no problem.
We saw it too.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, appreciate it. Ken Windrum, you wish to speak, Ken? Yeah, come on up. Just give me your name and I'll swear you in.
My name's Ken Windrum.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? So help
I
you
do,
God?
yes.
Go ahead, Ken.
My name's Ken Windrum. I'm the administrator with the Hayden Area Regional Sewer Board in beautiful Hayden, Idaho. And then I first want to acknowledge the City of Coeur d'Alene's wastewater department and planning department that they have been very conscientious in remembering that we have an outfall line. Also, the developer is very much aware that we have an outfall line that we need to have, or the people in Hayden are going to have to stop flushing, one or the other. We would encourage that the property along the west side be kept open. We've always had the vision that it'd be a great place for a paved road or something for people to take personal watercraft down to the river with her public access. Another comment, just a citizen observation. There are a lot of cities and communities in the country that have rivers that are tearing down industry along them and providing public access. Portland's a great example. They tore down that overhead freeway, and now it's a big park. You have a unique opportunity. Someone's torn it down. It's the time to make a decision that we're going to live with for 50 to 100 years or more, and maybe that time down the road, someone will want to buy $1 million homes that are there to provide that access. So good luck in your decisions. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Ken, for
I have a
speaking.
question.
Go ahead, Peter.
You came in as a sewer district, so is there an issue about your outfall?
No.
Okay.
The only issue is that we're going to upgrade that line in about 15 years. Right now, it's a 14-inch line. We're going to put in a 30-inch line. So having access to that line is critical. And the developer has acknowledged that he's not going to put a building over our line so that we
So
can.
you will
come
have
back.
that access and so
Yes.
forth. Very
Yeah,
good.
well, I'm going to take him at his word for it, and we'll be on top of him, so.
Well, I would assume you're doing more than that. We've had people take people for their word when it comes to whether you can get to your property or not. Somebody wants to put a gate on it, I would encourage that you have more than just a gentleman's agreement.
Yeah, you're right. And unfortunately, taking the words from my attorney, Nancy Strickland, the original easement was not written very well. And I don't know why predecessors to me didn't buy the property where the line is. But that's where we are today.
All I encourage you is both have a common understanding, that's all.
And I think we do. Would you agree? Yeah, I think we do, yeah. I just want to go on the record that we have a line and we're concerned about it.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Chet Gaddy, Chet? Oh, I think I know you.
Chet Gady?
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Go ahead, Chet.
I think the developers worked very hard to put the city into a position where they would have a hard time following their ordinances and codes and not approving this. That's not saying I think it's the best thing in the world. I think that he's done a good job. I think Terry's suggestion of maybe moving the gates is a pretty good one so that the access to the old railroad right-of-way is still there. However, those roads from Celtice to that right-of-way are private roads, so he can put those gates about anywhere he wants. I do have a huge concern looking at past city performance, because I think the ball's going to be in the city's court, on the shoreline ordinance. The shoreline ordinance is a very strange ordinance, I think. I think it was written to appease a bunch of people that wanted to protect the shoreline, and it's not very strong. One of the things I believe it says is that you can go around, probably not a legal term, go around the shoreline ordinance through a PUD process. So be careful about that and think about that. I believe in reading some of the documents that the applicant's intent, and I think this is a legitimate intent, is to knock down the banks. Because if you go down there and look at the river on his property, there's probably, or if you had been to the Atlas site development, there's a cliff there. And in order to do anything, if you're going to prepare it for docks, you're going to have to knock that down. The shoreline ordinance basically says you can't do that. But now within a PUD, you probably can do that. So think about your conditions and be maybe creative with your conditions and put staff to work. My understanding is that they're going to sell each one of those lots, and people like, no, not like me, other people are going to come in and buy those lots and build houses. So it'll be up to them to follow the shoreline ordinance. So you're going to have 28 people coming in to build houses. Who enforces the shoreline ordinance? We've talked about Belle Reve at every meeting I've ever been to about people not liking it, and we heard tonight that, gosh, they didn't have their 40 feet before the build setback. I don't think they did. I think they have a cliff like that with some rocks on it, and they measured that and got somehow 40 feet out of it. So what is the city process? And is there anything you can put in your conditions on this PUD to ensure that the city follows the process and enforces the shoreline ordinance within this PUD? Or does someone just hold it up and say, up, it's in a PUD, there is no shoreline ordinance? Because I think that would be an interesting position to defend and take, and it might work.
Well, let's ask staff that question.
During the PUD process, you can ask for waivers or modifications of the shoreline ordinance, but the applicant has not asked for any of that in this application.
But he did say he was going to grade the bank, correct, in the application? And the shoreline ordinance says he cannot.
You cannot, there's no build area in the first 40 feet, that's correct.
It also says he can't muck with the dirt on the bank, I believe. Now this, I don't have it in front of me, you do.
We'll have the applicant speak to that part
Muck
of
might be
it.
a technical term about what happens when you push the dirt down into the river.
Ted, I would have to, say we have a shoreline ordinance in there, and hopefully staff would, enforce a lot of the
But I'm looking
requirements.
at a citizen who thinks this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity
I
that we
agree.
maybe have lost. And we also lost Belle Reve. What happened there that allowed that to happen that you maybe can protect in your conditions?
And believe me, we are very aware of that, and, our eyes are open.
Okay,
to
and I just think
such
that
things.
you're hesitant to jump in there and say, I want a condition to say that, and see how hard staff
I don't
cringes.
think we said we can't put a condition on it. That'll come up when we have discussion here in a little bit, but
Okay.
and also let the applicant kind of address that and perhaps what he
You
is
might
going
want
to
to
do.
ask staff how it is enforced, and how come it wasn't enforced, and what's going to happen
Belle
to fix
Reve?
it. Yes.
Well, that's probably a discussion for another day, but if Hillary wants to address something.
The Belle Reve one has been enforced, so they have a tract A, which is the slope with the rocks, as you mentioned. They have a reduced setback. They have a plat meander line that they measure their setback from, and it's, I forget the exact, it's less than 40 feet.
It is less than
28
40
or
feet.
something. And 35, thank you. So, yeah, but we are enforcing it, and it gets enforced at the time of building permits, but
Does
we
that
do
get
need,
enforced at the building permit?
yes.
So the
It does.
the footprint of the buildings would actually come in, not in this plat, but they would come in the building permit.
That's
Okay.
correct, but I think it'd be helpful for the applicant to speak to how the shoreline will be graded and all of that.
Great. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Jeff, appreciate it.
So they would have to meet the shoreline criteria.
That's correct, but the PUD does allow them to do things like construction and things if they ask for it. So
So the PUD allows things that the shoreline ordinance in another place would not?
that's correct.
Okay. Do we know what those are? And do we agree to them?
Well, it has to be specifically requested with the PUD. What are the deviations to the code?
Which have not been requested.
They have not requested any reduced setbacks or any increased heights or any side yard setback reductions, but there's, yeah, I think there's probably is going to be some grading and improvements to the lots to address some of the slope, probably some slope stabilization that's going to be required.
So it may come back to us?
No.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Is this Shelley Porsche? Does not wish to speak. Mike Pellicero, and you do wish to speak.
Hi, Mike Pellicero.
Hey, I almost got it right. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Go ahead, Michael.
I just was happy driving by not too long ago and saw the signs out there for it, and so I kind of looked up, seeing what going on and everything on here, and just, we keep losing more and more access to the river for people. And as Mr. Whipple said, is that they have followed everything to the letter of the law, of whatever agreements you have, but was it the intent of it? Was it the, when they said public access, they gave, to have the amount of percentage, they gave the longest lot there.
Step up to the mic.
I'm sorry. They gave the longest lot there, but I mean, you think about that one lot that's as wide as
Hey,
this
you gotta face
room.
the mic, because otherwise
Okay,
you can't hear.
there's, you know,
Sorry.
the lot's basically as wide as this room is by counting the tiles up there of how wide this room is, 60 feet wide. You know, you got 250 apartments there, plus you want public access. I would have to agree with Commissioner Fleming that maybe move them on the end, give a little more river frontage and a little less depth, because most people going to the river are not going to be concerned about all the trail coming down to it. They're going to want river access. The other thing you're kind of looking at when I was looking at everything, the view corridor, that's at best a glimpse corridor, because from the looks of it, you stand right, like this, look through two 45-foot buildings, over a couple of trees, you might get to say, I think that's water. I don't think that's what they mean by a view. It's to try and see, and that's something you guys have to make a decision. Is it being met? To me, that's not really. The other thing is all of this area in here that belongs to the city. This just become an ideal opportunity, because you can see that belongs to the city, and everybody's saying, well, what do we do with it? Why not maybe work with the developer and say, where that opening comes through, right here, is this supposed to be gated, or is that going to be open?
That's open.
That's all, okay. As the other gentleman was saying, put the gate down here, have the developer work with the city, maybe put a little bit of a parking here. If this here is going to be one of the access, make a parking here, make the rest of this all like a park area with the trail through it. Now, you can work with them to have this developed, because I don't think the city's going to want to go in and build any buildings in there or put any commercial buildings in there. So then it just comes down to, now, who does what with this? So maybe in other cities that I've lived in where they have worked with that to try and make it, everybody work together. So now you got a park area. They can go above and beyond their 10%, because if you really look at what they're counting as 10% for 250 buildings that are 4 stories, they're kind of borderlining from, if you've ever been to New York or LA, some of the projects, 20 years down the road, that's about what that's going to look like, because there's no place for kids to play other than that little playground there in that community building. So maybe if they were to take and partner with the city and maybe do all of that as a park, have the trail go through it, and put a parking lot back in there so people could come in here, they could park and still have an access to the river, I think we could kind of meet a lot more things on it. So anyway, I appreciate it. Had a lot of things to say. Like I said, I'm not super familiar with everything on there. I mean, the block walls, a 6-foot block wall, I'm sorry, it says go away. That does not say public access. Hey, come enjoy the river. I think there's something else that could be done there. So anyway, that's just kind of what I say. It just seems like we're just losing more and more access, and it's just going to become everybody, there's a river down there someplace, and there's a lake over there, but you can't get to it. So maybe try to find a way on this here to work with the developer to get everything, actual public access, a view where people going by up on the road can see it. And people, especially handicapped, because those access there, you're gonna run into, what about handicap access? A 36-inch wide trail, so if you're in a wheelchair, disabled, you have a hard time walking, for that great big, long property there, they're not gonna be able to enjoy it. And, there is a lot of elderly here, and I think they'd still like to enjoy it. So, thank you for your time.
I appreciate you speaking. Thank you, John. That is all I have on the sign-up sheet, unless someone decided they want to speak that isn't on the sign-up sheet. If not, Lance? Oh, hi. Just state your name,
Gabrielle Miner.
and do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't have facts or figures. I have a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old, and we went for a bike ride the other day, and the boys took me along the water where this proposal is taking place, and I felt like a kid again. I was along the water, it was free, there was a rope swing. We could probably get rid of that, but the thought of that going away made me so sad, because these boys and these kids and all of us as people, we need to have the ability to commune with nature, water, a little bit of wild space. We went to Gig Harbor for a bike race. My older son is very much into bike racing. And one of the things that really struck me about Gig Harbor is how many spots along the water that the city dedicated for public use. And it was so noticeable to me. And then everything else was just across the road, very close. But it made me feel like I would love to live in a place where I knew that my city cared for me and my kids and wanted me to be able to enjoy the water and all those other things. And it really saddens me that I know it's so much of it about profit and money. And I just think that you all, and we are, at the precipice of deciding whether Coeur d'Alene is going to be an amazing city where people feel like they're welcome and you all took care of us and where they want to be, or that city where the more money you have, the more access you have and no one else does. So again, I don't have facts or figures, I just have my feelings. I've got my kids, and I got so sad when I started riding home and seeing all of the signs about the projected development. So I'd like to see more open space. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. That's all I have. Lance? Okay, Todd.
This is Todd Whipple again. I wanted to, so if you go to page 7 of my narrative, that's where that quote came from about grading. The intent of what I was writing there is the building envelopes will be located, so we're not gonna build the houses, Lance is gonna sell them, but he's gonna grade and prepare the lots. And since you can build right up to 40 feet, it would be almost impossible, well, maybe you could do it, but we assumed that they would prepare the lots, prepare a building pad, and there would be some grading beyond it, which is why we wrote what we wrote. Since we're not building the houses, we're not finishing the lots, we don't really know exactly what they're gonna do beyond the 40 feet, but we're gonna prepare the 40 feet, and it would make sense, I think Hillary coined it really well, which is there will be some grading in the 40 feet as we prepare the building pads, but that's as far as we were going. That was as far, and that's really kind of the intent of my paragraph on page 7. Then on traffic, we've talked about traffic at every one of these meetings, and I think the issue ultimately is if you remember the study that the city did, that actually included, we worked with Welch Comer on that, and that actually included our 870 units at the time. And so that traffic study then now would be 600 long from where we are now today. So they included our 870, they built those approaches for our 870, they did a lot of things as it related to improvements along Celtis Way for our originally proposed 870, and now we're down to 250 plus 28. So I think if you were to take those 600 units out of that traffic study, I think you'd find that the comment that Chris Bosley meant that by just by looking at it as a professional engineer, you'd say that there will be considerably less impacts, and to some degree, it will actually reduce many of the proposed impacts or anticipated impacts, not only on Celtice, but also on Northwest Boulevard. So, I don't know if Lance is next, unless you have questions, or Ed.
Questions before I close public?
Well, I think Lance is going to go
Yes.
maybe, and then Ed.
Oh, Lance, you coming up? Oh, come on up. Sure.
Hello again.
Hello again.
There was a little bit of questions on our gate that we have located up here, and another one here. There was a proposal to move it down to the R12 entrance to allow the public to come in off of Celtice down to the right-of-way and park and have access to the trail. That's fine with me. We can put the gate down at our R12 line to allow the public access from Celtice down to the railroad right-of-way.
So that would be okay as a condition if we...
Sure. Yeah.
Can I jump in on that with a question? And I'm sure you're going to understand this with your own Bella Reeve access that's complicated that you have across Bella Reeve to get to your 11 lots down there, or whatever the number is. So it's not just moving the gate, but it would be granting the city an easement to have access across the private parcel to get down to it.
We've already, that's part of the proposal anyway, that those are private roads with a public access easement on them. So that was already part of the proposal to allow that.
So as I drive by I could be in my private car after this is developed, drive by the apartment, what do you call that, clubhouse there. I'm trying to, down with the gate moved, I could drive down there and potentially park if the city chose to create some parking in that parcel of theirs, correct?
Park in the city right of way.
The city right of way.
Yes.
I have another question. If we were to recommend to move the 16-foot wide bike ped path, and by the way, up at the Croc Center, they drive on it all the time. The city drives on it all the time. It carries heavy vehicles for snow clearing, for service, all the time. So to access down future for sewer lines or any kind of access, it's very drivable. But if we were to move that, but you're paying for that, you would pay for the actual asphalt path. You've now regained, theoretically, behind your fence, 16 feet of saleable land. Am I correct?
Yes, but as you're well aware, the value of riverfront property is not on depth, it's on width on the river.
I know. And so my ask is it's not going to help you because those shotgun lots get unbuildable and they're not very viable. All you end up with is a row house. Could some of your dedicated 10% of green space grow on the river? Could you see yourself giving back to us a little bit of that give that we said, hey, you can move your 16-foot wide path up to our city land and not tack that 16 feet back onto your already very deep lots? Could you give us some waterfront?
No, but I could leave the trail where it's at in our proposal, and that's why we put it on there, on my R12 portion.
I can tell you right now, it's dangerous when you've got cyclists up against a hard wall and prams and people walking, and our cyclists don't go 15 miles an hour. They go 35 here. So you're a pedestrian up against very fast transit, and so you've got nowhere to go except into a block wall. So I'm not keen on that relationship. And also, you just don't see anything. You're up against a wall. So, I mean, I could see that some of our builders would give us a little bit of that give. We just gave you land by moving that 16 feet into our land. We just gave you a bonus that you weren't building.
But the ground that you're giving me is, as you already acknowledged, the depth on those lots increases value not one iota.
Not a lot.
Whereas
And so
the
if we
frontage
could steal
footage
some of these
is all the
unbuildable-
water. So you're saying that you're giving up a worthless piece of property in the 16 feet and wanting the most expensive property on the site in balance of it.
Well,
So
some of
you're
those
not
are
really
very
comparing
tight,
apples
shallow
to
lots.
apples.
you know. I mean, it's just a thought. Instead of just doing bare minimum 10%, some of our builders do give us more than that.
Well, I think on our previous proposals, we've done 30%, 20%, and 10%. We've come in with 6 proposals now, and we've blown away that 10% on every one of them, and this is the least one, and this one complies with everything, all of your requirements. So,
It's a thought. I mean, I just wanted to throw it out there.
Mr. Chair, the purpose of a PUD is to benefit the property owner and the city. And that benefit for both things is determined by us, by a vote.
Okay.
Okay. It was some, I'm going to speak to that when it's time to speak.
And it gives us a plan to say that
But the
you
point
can't
is,
verify it.
it's a compromise, it's a mutual choice, that we both agree that our benefits are reached and we're comfortable with the benefits to the other party.
Yes.
Very good.
but I would like to add to that, we're not asking for any variances that we're entitled to ask for in a PUD.
Right.
So when you say it goes both ways, it's the city's allowed to get some benefit, and then we're getting benefit. The only reason we're doing a PUD is because it's required in the annexation agreement in 2013.
Well, that was a
We
benefit, wasn't it?
specifically did not ask for one thing over and above what's allowed by code, so we didn't get into that situation that you're talking about right there. So we're receiving no benefit whatsoever from the PUD.
You
We're
got
not asking
annexed.
for anything.
You got an annexation?
No, I didn't. I got an annexation in 2013 that was irregardless of this hearing tonight. And we're complying with that annexation agreement 100%.
That was done by Washington Trust, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And the PUD at least gives us a plan of what the development's going to be, instead of just a blanket C-17, R-13, or whatever. So this in front of us, if this is approved, has to go forward. Any change to this, they have to come back to us. So it's not so much
Right,
that it's a
right.
benefit for the city, it's kind of a benefit for, say, the community to say, all right, this is what's going to be there, whether you like it or you don't like it. So, so that's the kind of the benefit I see in a PUD.
Well, the
And-
absence of it gives us a lot less say in what happens. I mean,
Well, I can hardly wait for my comments.
Okay, all right, I'll give you a comment. Yeah. Anything else?
No.
I'm
Appreciate
sorry,
you.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
I've got to drill down just a little bit, because I think
Okay.
this is huge. Mr. Godbout talked about moving those gates, and I just got to really understand, if you take, and let's whether or not we push, let's say there's a condition that we craft that says something to the effect that the city and the applicant are to explore a preferred open space plan that locates the open space parcels to the east and west ends of the R12 properties. Let's say there's a condition like that. As I would understand that, it would mean that we would approve this as it stands, but we're agreeing mutually to go off and see if we couldn't work to a different solution, correct?
Correct.
So if we did that, regardless of that, let's take for now the existing easterly access point that Mr. Godbout was talking about, moving the gates to the south or the north edge of the R12. I think presuming in there, that the presumption in there is that would facilitate public access by a car, correct?
That would allow public access to the railroad right-of-way, which is now gated off from a car because the gate is on the north side of the right-of-way.
Well, I think I heard you say that you'd be open to, say, if the city made some parking along there, correct?
Right, the city can do whatever, they own the right-of-way property, so they could put parking in there if they choose. Terry, I believe what I took his point was, is the gate that's located right here would preclude a vehicle from coming in off of Celtice to access the railroad right-of-way that the city owns and the parking that you're referring to. So what I'm saying is, and what Terry suggested, is move the gate down to the south edge of our R12, down in this area right here, which would allow the city to still have vehicular access along the road down to the railroad right-of-way. And so they could have parking lots in here or whatever they want to do. It would give them access to their railroad right-of-way, which they now do not have.
And I'm just truly trying to understand that you're going to operate these apartments. They're going to be yours. And I just want to understand very clearly that you're okay with the public kind of, in the case of that easterly most one, they're kind of driving around through the parking lot, your parking lot, to get to a potential city parking lot access point, and you're okay with that?
Most of our apartments none of my apartments are gated right now. So when people cut through them to go a shortcut through the block, that happens all the time.
Understand. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else?
Last chance? Okay.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to close public, go, right ahead.
We have Ed Lawson would like to speak.
Sure, go ahead, just have to state your name and I'll have you sign up. Just state your name and I'll swear you in.
Yeah, Ed Lawson.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? So help you God, Ed.
I do.
Go right ahead, Ed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My name is Ed Lawson. I'm a lawyer. I represent Rivers Edge Apartments. I'm not here to tell you guys how to do your job. I don't presume to know what the local public interest is. I practice outside of the area. But what I am here to tell you is I don't have a PowerPoint. So that'll help. I'm an advocate for Rivers Edge in connection with this application and want to basically explain to you how it came to be. We've been through the applicant has been through the approval process on 5 prior occasions over several years and has yet to get an approval from the city of Coeur d'Alene for a project. The goal here was to develop an application that met or exceeded all of the applicable requirements. The annexation agreement, the city codes, including the shoreline district rules and regulations, the subdivision PUD provisions in the code, and we believe that we have accomplished that. Rivers Edge has submitted to you an application which fully complies with all of the applicable restrictions. And I believe that you've heard from staff that is the case. I want to thank the members of the public who have participated in this hearing. It always is better to have public participation, and there have been some great ideas raised, some of which have, a real possibility of becoming implemented as a part of the project. You folks as well have raised some great ideas on how to improve this application. But at the end of the day, I want to remind you that you're tasked with making findings of fact. And you can't look at emotional appeals as constituting facts. You can't look at statements about concerns over traffic as constituting a fact. They have to be facts. And you have to make those findings as they relate to the standards of approval. And in doing so, you're expected to put aside any biases or prejudices that you may have for or against my client or this project, and make a judgment based upon neutrality in evaluating the standards. I would like to point out in that regard that in the course of putting together this application, not only did Rivers Edge look at the written standards of approval and the written contractual requirements, but it looked at other projects within the shoreline district that you have approved in the recent past as an indication of what was and is in the public interest of the citizens of this city. Looked at the Mills River and the Riverstone projects in particular in coming up with its proposal. The idea being to be the implementer of public policy. That public policy is required by law, however, to be expressed in your codes, which they are, and we have met each one of those code requirements. In this case, the only thing different from the Mill River or the Riverstone projects is we have an annexation agreement that was made in 2013. That's a contract between Rivers Edge and the city of Coeur d'Alene. It binds both parties. And implied in every contract is the covenant of good faith and fair dealing. So I would ask you to recognize that what we have before you is what's referred to as applications for PUD and subdivision approval. These trigger what is known as a quasi-judicial process. You are the judges. You have to make the decision as to whether or not to grant the approval based upon the law as reflected in your codes and ordinances and the annexation agreement, and apply the facts to that law. And I think that if you do that, I'm confident that you will do that, and that you will reach the same conclusion that we did in putting the application together, and that staff did in preparing its report to you, which is that all of the applicable requirements have been met or exceeded. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. I am going to close public testimony at this point and bring it to the commissioners for further discussion, hopefully a motion. Go right ahead.
I have a comment to kick it off.
Yes.
Could we put up the slide that shows the site with the old mill properties? I don't know who had that slide. Would you, Mr. Whipple, is that slide available, showing the old mill properties as they were? I don't know if there's a picture of that.
You can do it. It's on my presentation. It's one of my first slides. You're in Todd's presentation.
I am. Is it yours, Liz?
Yeah.
Okay.
In business meetings, this is kind of referred to as level setting. So everybody in the room has a perspective that we can share together. So this is what it was. And frankly, now that that has been centrally cleared, it's not much further along than it is as demonstrated here. You essentially have vacant land. And I don't know where this picture, what the date of this picture was. But as a community, certainly this wasn't serving us. Having the land vacant isn't serving us. So as members of the community, we certainly want to, improve the property from where it was. And we can all agree that that's not what, in the highest best use of riverfront property was. So I'm sympathetic to Mr. Douglas in that he's come in front of us and the city council, I think, what was it, 5 times now? 6 times? Or is this the 6th or the 5th time? 6th. This is the 6th time. This project, and I'll just state quite clearly, in my mind, looks very much like Mill River. I lived in Mill River. There's townhomes, there's riverfront homes, there's cottage homes, there's storage units, and there are apartments, all in the same area. I'm also touched by that, we're a community, we're a country of a rule of law. I was actually moved by what, I can't remember your name, the council just spoke, but this is an approvable project. It is meeting all of the law, if you will, as it relates to development in the rights of the ownership. Now, we all can agree that in a country of rule of law, rights of control follow ownership. So Mr. Douglas owns this property. He has the right to develop it within the constraints of the code that has been established by our elected officials and us as a governing body. And he's done that now. And it's very difficult to I'm also sympathetic to some of the things that have been said today, but the public can't claw back rights that are owned by a private citizen. I understand that riverfront access and lakeshore access is important, and communities that have prioritized that. Someone mentioned Bend. I lived in Bend for some time. And what the elected officials in Bend have decided is they're going to prioritize green space and access to those valued resources, the riverfront and otherwise, by essentially taking the taxes from the population and buying that green space. So their ownership governs the control of the use of that property. And the elected officials have agreed to do that. And the public has elected officials to do that. And maybe the city got into the game late. I commend and support the Atlas Mill property acquisition. Therefore, it has control. The city, there's much more control as it relates to the essentially disposition of that property and the access to the riverfront to the public through ownership. Now, I'm not prepared to make a motion. I think others more skilled in the motion making here today, but I would support Mr. Douglas's request for the POD and the platting as proposed here today. And if there are some considerations for some modifications to the change of the view corridors or the change of the green space, and again, I'll leave others to do that, I would support those as well. If the change of the gate, all those other things, I think those are all, and I appreciate the willingness to do so based upon the comments here today. So I just wanted to stand in support and just wanted the commissioners to know my position.
Well, thank you. Go ahead, John.
I'm gonna echo a good bit of that. There's good in this project. This is about findings, not emotions, and whether this is there or not. It's less dense, less traffic, et cetera. There are a couple quirks here, though. I think that having the city property that runs through it on your map here with a big question mark is a little quirky. We know there's some quirks at Bella Reeve with access and how the public wants to go down there and use that. And we've had the homeowners association here before us explaining the problems that we have. So we trying to get the public in to use these little public parcels, I think is a little bit quirky. I think, in my mind, if we could work on 3 conditions, one having to do with the city and the applicant exploring the preferred open space plan of pushing those parcels to the outside, moving the gates with the preservation of a public access right away onto this public's land. Otherwise, the public's land is city's property is landlocked. I think Mr. Douglas said it already exists. I think we need to nail that down, move the gates. And I think another condition that the city and the applicant move the trail to the alternate location without a wall. With those kind of adjustments, I could be pretty supportive.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah. Again, coming back to what our job is up here and what the findings are based on what staff has presented to us as well as the applicant, with no special requests or modifications. This is 40% for me. This is only my second of the applicant's efforts. But in thinking about what came before us in December, there was a strong public sentiment about the density concern and the bulk of the building and the height of the building not being compatible with Coeur d'Alene, with the core downtown, and just lots of concerns about the sheer number of units. The applicant has addressed that. And there was sentiment that we as a community, some people spoke that maybe surrendering some of that exact waterfront trail access was okay in exchange for lower density, in exchange for a lower footprint. And so I think the bulk and the lower density have been addressed by this. I think we don't have strong working definitions or objective criteria about what access means and what view means. And I'm reluctant to have conditions that we can't actually quantify or objectively meet. And since we don't specify vehicular access, we don't specify handicap access, we have it as public access. I think that flexibility is something that we need to maintain, but I also think we shouldn't include it in any conditions because there's no way to measure it, if it's been met or not. So that's one caveat that I'd like to consider when we do recommendations or conditions is do we have a basis for evaluating if they've been met or not? And some of them that are listed here, I think we do. I think exploration of changing the gates and moving the open space project, and we can quantify the square footage. So I'm in support. I think it was reassuring to see the letter from the school district. I know that's been a big cause of of public concern. I think that's a much bigger, broader issue than just this development, as is traffic. So we have data and findings before us that are based on evidence and fact and staff research, and I appreciate that.
Mike?
Yeah, I want to go on record as saying that I certainly do want to support it, because I certainly do agree with Commissioner Rumpler and everything that you said. But I do also want to remind everyone that the previous public hearing where we denied, and then of course on appeal went to City Council, and that was also further denied. There was that conversation and the concept of a land swap. Had that gone through, yes, there would have been higher density, but there would have been direct access to the water along a corridor of land that the city would have owned in exchange for the strip that we now still own. So I just want to put that into context, again, just to say that we can't have our cake and eat it too. You know, for us to be able to say it would be nice to have waterfront access with a trail, well, we had that opportunity, but that would have come at the cost of higher density. We would have also, as a city, picked up that piece of land in the process. But that's all behind us. All of that was denied. So here we are with a viable solution that meets all the requirements as stated. Very nicely done by you, so thank you for doing that. So I just want to say that.
Mr. Chair, I sort of chuckling to myself because I think we all come to these meetings open-minded. We read the material and everything, and we take our testimony and we make our decisions, whatever it is. And we are open-minded. I'm chuckling because I didn't realize I was so open-minded. Because I have a little different views than my fellow commissioners. And I'm used to having a discussion and talking about it, meeting, and an extended period. We don't have that opportunity, and we shouldn't, because, you know, we need to make our decision based on the facts we are presented to us, not something in the back room. However, I'm more, not used to the back room, but more discussion. My understanding of a PUD is mutual benefit. And my definition of mutual benefit may be different, and I think is different than others. When I was sitting here, I got very concerned and upset and so forth about the wall. And then I read in our backup material that they talked about the shoreline more, and they talked about East Lakeshore Drive, and you saw through the fence there. You had some visibility. Oh, that's good. And then as we were talking, I thought, no, I lived down there area, and I was thinking about West Lakeshore Drive. And, you know, you get views there and everything. And what do you have in both places? You have a road. And I can tell you, East Lakeshore Drive, when it's summertime, that thing is just packed with people walking and pushing, and cars are there. I mean, it's just a wonderful little thing, and everybody sort of sees the lake. And the same thing on West Lakeshore Drive. And that's visibility. And then you look at some of the houses on West Lakeshore Drive, and you look at some of the houses on East Lakeshore Drive, and they're very, very nice homes. Now, there was a couple times that some property owners wanted to trade the road in front of them to the city to make it private on their property, and I can see why. It's sort of like what's before us here. So I'm thinking, now, this is a PUD, mutual benefit. One of the benefits that the property owner has is private roads. It offers some benefits, and I'm sure some disadvantages too, but it's cost of private roads. So that is a benefit. Then I'm thinking, well, if we didn't have private roads, if we had public roads, what would the property look like? Where would the roads be? Well, would there be a road right along the river? sort of like the Lakeshore Drive area. Well, I don't know, maybe there could be. Well, maybe a mutual benefit is private roads, maybe there should be the bike trail, the Centennial Trail, should skirt along the water, much like your East Lakeshore Drive and West Lakeshore Drive does. But it's for foot traffic and bike traffic. Now that seems that, you know, they get private roads someplace, and we get in exchange we get also a little bike trail. Now is that going to hurt the value of the property? Well, I don't know. You know, does it hurt the value of the property on East and West Lakeshore Drive? Oh, I don't. I'm not a realtor. Maybe it does. Then, well, what about docks? Well, you go down Lake. Lake Coeur d'Alene Drive? Is that what it is? And well, look at there. There's this nice house on the first. This build up right across the main arterial, and it's for sale at a very handsome price. Well, to me, a handsome price. And right across the street, you got to go across the street. There's your dock. They have a dock there. So they're thinking, well, now, if you had a bike trail or a pedestrian trail or a site along the river here, that wouldn't inhibit the property owner from putting a dock down, doesn't this other area? What kind of value would it take away from the property, those 28 property owners? Well, the value it took away would be less than the value of a road would take away, possibly. So I'm thinking, you know, maybe with a PUD, maybe that could be some more work on exchange to get that bike trail down by the water. And I don't know how strong I feel about that. I imagine it will be when the roll call comes. But I'm thinking that if my understanding of PUDs are correct, mutual benefit, I don't think there's enough benefit for the city in this plan. And I must say that, yes, that is an ugly thing up there. But it was our city. It employed many people, not only there, but in the woods and so forth. It was an asset. And if you go right across the street, you see the corrals and gates that we talked about last meeting. Just some point of reference, I'm somewhat familiar with that area. But anyway, I just think I've just talked myself into opposing this.
Okay. Lynn?
That's almost all been said. I think we should move the gates. I think there should be real clarity between private and public. I don't think there should be any crossover, no confusion, because when we do have the public on our pathways, we want them to have very clear access to that river. And right now, it's very murky. And then I do think that we need to make clarity that the developer will provide standpipes adequate to serve docks in the future to be built by whomever, landowners. And that we keep in perpetuity that moved path that is now on city land is also the means and access to those sewer lines and to maintenance of those parks. Because those fall back onto us, do they not? The parks on the river?
If they're public.
If they're public, they're ours. So
His
now we
will
got to
be,
get
though,
people there to clean trash.
privately owned with public access easement, so they'll be owned, yeah, the HOA will maintain those.
HOA will maintain that? Okay, all right. And then I would urge you, Mill River has some great fencing. They have a combination of trees, block, wrought iron. Take a look at it. It's not just one big rock wall. You know, walls do say keep out. And then overall, I think it's a heck of an improvement. I think it suits the adjacencies, it fits well. I think even the storage units, which I don't like, I think you should just give it away and give it to somebody else to use. Don't stuff it in a storage unit. But everybody loves it. So, and that's a great buffer to what is a parking lot. So it has a use. Who wants to park next to wants to live next to a parking lot? So it has its buffer zone. And I do like that we are identifying that there's connectivity between this and what will become Atlas. So I think that this developer has gone a long way to placating us, and I don't expect us to have a path on the water. the land is too valuable. So I think that's where, we've said it all. I think that we've got it. We just need to revise those bullet points and capture those. Right?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I've been up here for all of the 5 presentations over the years, and I've seen it all, and this is the best I've seen, basically. I give credit to the applicant for sticking in there and trying to work with the city before, and things just didn't work out. I agree with what the other commissioners said about some of the conditions, the gates, the trail, and the other items that were mentioned, that moving the open space, and hopefully staff can work with the applicant and come to that agreement, because that would benefit us as far as the city goes and the applicant to have the best access we can have on that river. And if people want to put their toes in the river, they can. We're not going to get, as Commissioner Fleming said, a dedicated trail on that. We tried, it didn't work before, and we are here today. So I am now going to ask for one of our commissioners, Mr. Ingles, to make a motion.
I'm going to drill down just a little bit on conditions, because I think that's where
Yes.
where we're at with this. And a point for you, Mr. Chairman, and staff potentially. We have to be careful here, because we can't tie the hands of the city. We're maybe landing on, take the trail. If we all see that the alternate location, which is through the center of the city's property, is the better place for the trail without a wall,
We'll recommend it.
I think that has to
Need
be
to
in the
make a
form of a
recommendation
recommendation, much like the
to
condition
relocate.
of, say, the green space. I think our condition is going to be somewhat soft.
Yes,
In terms
has
of,
to be.
city and developer will, explore.
Right.
A preferred location. So we're saying a preferred location because we can't bind the city up here with our,
Well, let
No,
me,
but can we modify it so it's a preferred location that optimizes public access? And so the condition
Right.
is such that we are referring to city departments to decide where the best placement is of the green open space, public open space, and the trail and the gates, so that public access is optimized.
I think so. So if we have these soft conditions, we have to be comfortable, I believe, that if it just kind of grinds to a halt and doesn't work, then, this is the default solution, though. And are we okay with that? And so that's, so in that, I'm in favor of moving the exploring moving the open space to the outsides, moving the gates, and exploring the trail being in a preferred location in the center with no wall. And if that doesn't work and it stays in its current location, I still don't like a wall. I think that's just very rough edge along there. And if we're talking about vistas, we're not just talking about vistas of driving down Celtus and getting a little glimpse down there. Riding along that bike path with a wall right there is not a very good vista, And if it, like Lynn said, could at least be, and Peter, you said, if it could be just a different type of fencing with nice wrought iron or something like that,
Mill River already has it.
with a minimum of landscaping, because over 20 years, that nice
Yes.
wall,
That's
not
good.
wall, but fence would be covered with landscaping.
Commissioner
perhaps.
Fleming,
I-
in terms of, you've actually worked with some of the homeowners.
I've done about half of
You've had,
Shoreview.
so what
Yeah.
about fencing? Does fencing provide security or sense of security, or?
Well, in
what is
that
it- what is it
street,
serving?
with that
What's it-
locked and gated and with the block wall, yes, they let the grandkids run in the street, the dogs run in the street, the cyclists, it's all there. So they use that as part of their playground, all the homeowners, and it's where they get together to have parties and barbecues and they interact. So what I'm trying to make sure is that those homeowners have their privacy. If we're really gonna do this right, I think it doesn't have to be block wall, it can be an ornamental fence. But I don't think they feel like most of them are garage entry, side, you go walk way past the garage. So it's not like you're looking in the front living room. You're not even looking on a porch.
Look at the
Your
garage.
your side entry, every single one of those side entries, and these will be side entries as well.
But no fence is not
No fence is not, I think we're running into another Belle Reve problem, because you've got a lot of people already running and cycling, fat tires and stuff already there, moving. So I think you really, for this caliber of property, you're gonna want to have it gated of some sort, so they do have that sense of this is our property. And I'm not a big advocate of fence, but I don't think in this instance, you can keep it wide open. There's just gonna be too much travel through here on pedestrians, and we've seen the problems in Belle Reve, so.
But a visibly transparent fence
Transparent.
would solve the problem of the
Yeah,
security.
wrought iron.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Mill River has it. You drive in right as you go past the chiropractic areas, and they have this riotous fence of wrought iron, trees, some wood, it's a mixture. And so it doesn't strike you as being, don't come in. So, and I think too, the benefit to moving the path back onto the city land, you've now elevated as well. So now you're getting up to where you actually do have perspective. Instead of being jammed up against the fence, you've risen probably 10, 15 feet. You're up on a slope. I mean, aren't you coming up on the slope, or are you down flat? I didn't walk that. I wanted to, but my dog didn't want to. So
There's a slight elevation gain.
there's a slight elevation. You might get a little more view if you get that path further.
Maybe a slight increase.
You'll have a little bit of grade, a little bit more trees in the distance, so, yeah, we can't demand we put a path on the front. It doesn't flow. I don't think it flows. So I think we're right in putting it where the railway easement is, and we pick it up on the other end, both ends.
But I didn't mean to interrupt Commissioner Ingalls in his.
And what's the next
thought
thing,
process.
John?
If you
Yeah,
go to the-
we gotta keep going,
to the
John.
motion.
I
Yeah,
think we're not here to maximize the value of the property to the developer, are we?
Well, we have to respect him for
We
his
respect
investment.
that's certainly the case, you know.
We have to respect
But
him for his
we also
investment.
have to maximize value to the citizens, to our community, to the PUD. But anyway,
Commissioner Ingalls, I have a quick question, comment to you. So under the special conditions, condition number 4, if docks are to be constructed, it's already here. It says the fire department will require access to the docks, including a standpipe system. Does that address the standpipe concern, Lynn, or is that something that needs to be
I would reword this.
rewritten?
I'd say developer to provide standpipes adequate to serve future dock construction with access for the fire department. Make it really specific.
Okay.
And I know they're gonna honorably do this, but let's just spell it out.
Sure.
It's a condition.
That's why I was
So,
asking. I wanted
Yeah,
to.
it's not is it gonna happen? No, let's make it happen,
Okay.
because they're gonna put
Right,
docks
I agree.
there. Yeah, so I'm just saying developer to provide standpipes adequate to serve future dock construction, and with access for the fire department.
Just trying to help you, John.
Okay, well, before we have a motion, I want to ask staff, given what you've heard from the commissioners, and perhaps a motion with conditions, whether they're soft or whatever the terminology you want to use for that, what's the advice of staff of us making this motion with conditions that aren't in our package now? What's the best advice you can give us?
I think, so some of it, we need to probably just work through and craft the language so that there is some flexibility if you want to show preference for certain things. There's a couple of the conditions that I don't know that the applicant said they were okay with, so we just need to make sure, for example, the wall, that's going to become more of a fence or open view or something. I think that needs to be addressed.
Or
And then
deliberate.
clarification on the providing the standpipes as well. I think the other ones, they seemed willing to work on those other conditions.
So testimony is closed, the hearing is closed, but would it be appropriate and okay if we had a short conversation with the, seeing heads nod over there? I wonder if we might have a question or two on conditions with Mr. Douglas.
You would need to open the hearing and then close it again.
If that would benefit us getting clarity on our conditions and the commissioners being comfortable in making some recommendations, I have no problems of opening up the public hearing again, and I'll ask Randy if that is okay to do.
Yes, you can do that.
Okay, so I'll open up the public hearing side of this particular item so that we can clarify and I want to
These points.
state that, clarify, just a discussion for the conditions. So, have at it, whoever wants to, if Mr. Douglas wants to,
think
if
he needs to
Lance
come
wants to
back
come
up.
up again and address us, or we ask whatever
Should we
questions
go
we
through
want. I
point
think
by
you-
point the conditions?
I think you get a feel for where we're going,
Yes.
so perhaps you can help us to get to that point.
So to put in the standpipes,
Yeah.
we would do that anyway, so that's
I think you
totally
said
fine.
that. Okay.
To move the gate down to the north side of the R12
Right.
to allow public access to the right-of-way, completely fine with that.
Okay.
You are correct, Commissioner Fleming is correct, that the trail is higher in the middle. The railroad right-of-way rises as it goes to the north. So if you move the trail from the north edge of our R12 property into the right-of-way, it's going to elevate the trail, and it'll be higher than the fence. It goes up quite a bit in there. So you are correct on that. Willing to put the right-of-way, the trail in the right-of-way, that's fine. As far as the fence goes, we need to have some type of security on the site, whether it's a combination of a block fence for a portion of it, wrought iron fence for a portion of it, some artistic steel fence, something needs to be there. And you definitely do see that in Bella Reeve now with all the people that are using that railroad right-of-way, all the complaints that that I get from the city from people entering the right-of-way from my property. So it kind of goes both ways. It's not just the trail people coming onto the private property, it's private property, uncontrolled access onto the city trail with vehicles or whatever else they want to get on there. So I think that the fence is a must-have for security, protects both sides. What the fence is made out of, I think, a combination of things would look nice.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be one set thing.
Doesn't have to be completely sight obscuring.
No, it doesn't have to be some completely sight obscuring block. I think that if you do some wrought iron, I think you can, if you leave us flexibility to design it, you could have some sheet steel product in there with fish cut in it, trees cut in it, something like that. You could have some block sections. You can have some wrought iron spindle sections. You can make it visually interesting, so it's not just a flat
Exactly.
tilt-up wall for
Like along the freeway.
1,600 feet.
Which Shoreview is, just a flat block. wall,
Right.
CMU.
But something that
For houses,
50% of the wall, we'll call it, would be transparent to allow view,
Sure.
I don't-
And so that would be, my vision of that would be, so if we want to do a portion of a wall that's, let's say it's a sheet steel product with trees laser cut out of it, or animals, or, something like that, that would give it some interest. So it doesn't, when you say sight, viewable through, it's not just a 1/4-inch spindle every 4 inches. I mean, that's kind of boring. So the houses are high-end houses. They would accent the house, give us the ability to accent the houses to make them nice.
If the trail were, if we were to explore the alternate location of the trail, would the wall stay where it is?
No, it moved north.
No,
Does it
moves
move
to
with the
north.
trail?
Yeah. it
North
moves.
line,
It would move to the property line.
right.
Yeah, it moves, because right now you've got fence on the south side,
Yeah,
fence,
got it.
and you've got path. And so that could move forward, and that's where that 16 feet
All
comes.
within the property line.
All within the property line, that's 16 feet. So you could get some landscaping even on
Correct.
the inside, especially for the homeowners, that
Well,
would
when we
give you
want to do
some.
that, put some
Yeah.
evergreen-type trees in there to
Right
soften it up
now,
a little
Shoreview
bit.
has like 2 feet, and you can barely back out, yeah, so. it
Some
would gain some-
arborvitae's, some,
Yeah.
something that's an evergreen that looks nice 12 months a
Soften it.
year. Yeah.
So if we had, if you bear with me,
He writes this.
I'm trying to get this thing
He's trying to
done.
write it in his
Okay.
mind.
If we had some conditions that said something to the effect that the city and the applicant will explore a preferred open space plan that locates the open space parcels to the east and west ends of the R12 properties, is that clear to you?
So the way I hear that, and it'd be up to Hillary as the planning director, is we would approve it with where they're at now. But
Correct.
both sides would work, I would prefer it be on the ends. I am hearing you prefer it be on the ends.
Right.
We have a fire department we need to talk to, and there's a part of the planning code, I think it says has to be a certain spacing, which is up to Hillary to decide. So if you direct us and she's open, if you're open to that, I would prefer it to be on the ends. It makes complete sense to put it there.
So that statement, you know what that means, they know what that means, we know what that means, the camera is recording all of this, we'll know what that works, correct?
Let me ask Hillary that, based on that conversation we just had, and I want to address each one of these conditions so that when we make them, staff is okay with them and everybody understands them. Related to the open space, what John just said, I'm assuming he's going to make a motion, that particular open space statement is acceptable for you guys?
Yes, so I think kind of the verbiage that he had presented would work. We could also add in there kind of a clarification, just that we need to make sure that we maintain the fire access, because I think that was probably why that was drafted in the first place in the code, but yeah.
And should that be in the motion, maintain fire access with that condition?
You could, I mean, I drafted a really long condition. I don't know if you need all of the things, but I mean, saying ensuring the 10% open space, fire access, and then I had view corridors, but as Commissioner Mandel said, maybe that's not as necessary, but I do feel like there should be some of the open views.
Well, you could even have Knox boxes on the end heading out into those green spaces. You could have a Knox box so you're not in a dead end. So that the fire trucks could come in from the park sides. I mean,
All right,
make
since
it
we got
open.
that one handled,
So
let's go to the.
second one would just be, the condition was, we agree, we're directing the moving of the gates to the north edge of the R12
Correct.
property.
Is that okay? All right.
And then the applicant and city will explore the alternate location of the trail.
Yes.
Okay.
And that the wall, the fourth one would be that the wall would be 50% open visible, designed to have 50% open visibility.
I think that's fine from staff. I kind of like the language that's in the shoreline ordinance that's for the Sanders Beach or the site obscuring, but however you want to word that. But I think the one thing with, if you had arborvitae that was, blocking that, then you would completely obscure that open view. So I think just maybe so that we figure out how that 50% is, that there's some views through that's not going to be obstructed by landscaping either.
But that kind of gets, so that gets back to the view corridor I was talking about. So the fence is offensive to some people, so you want to soften it with plantings, because plantings always look nice. But then when your plantings grow up to 6 foot tall and they hide your fence, which is what you want, because bushes look better, we don't want to come in and cut the bushes back down and start over and plant little bushes again. So it's kind of a,
I
don't
think
know,
we're
I don't
looking
know
for
how
a
you do
creative
that.
solution
Yeah,
that's
we would like,
long-term.
I would like to soften it up with plants.
Let's
It'll
just,
look
Well, I think
better.
there's two things here. But don't correct me. It's, I like your creativity and freedom of design and doing something cool, but as we ride along there, it'd be good to be able to get a glimpse every now and then of that. I'm after a little bit of break and
right,
there
airflow,
once in a while.
view.
So maybe it'd be 50% of the fence could be solid, and the rest of it is some type of sight through, I don't know the
Screening.
term. Some
Oh,
sight
Obscuring.
Obscuring, non-obscuring.
not really sight obscuring, something you
But it
can
would be
see.
Maybe you could use what you have in East Lakeshore Drive.
The way the ordinance
they have some.
Go ahead,
reads
Randy.
with respect to Sanders Beach says,
Yeah.
fences are no more than 50% sight obscuring. So it's the,
So under that, we would be, 50% would be sight obscuring, and the rest would be see-through.
But no more than.
And then with Hillary, we could do, if we came with a proposal with the sheet fences, I think look kind of cool. And so you could do the cutting of the trees and the animals and all that stuff in it. Or we could vary the textures, whether it's not just block for 50%, we could do the woven steel boards that go back and forth, which is again, texture, and that looks cool. So, we
I
can
think as
come up
long
with
as there's-
something good on that.
Let's come up with
If we
something.
just leave it at 50%
unique.
side obscuring, that would be,
Yeah, and keep
Oh,
in mind,
something cool.
landscaping grows. I mean, we can come up with a great fence that
Yeah.
you can see through somewhat, but then if you put planting in front of it in 10 years, and so, as you mentioned, you don't see the fence, so however that condition is
Right.
put in here, at least address it, so.
I think the homeowners don't mind seeing life passing them by. They just don't want to know that they're coming into their garage when they leave the door up, you
Right.
know? I
Right.
mean, really, that's really what
and
they're.
the other thing that you touched on was that trail is gonna be elevated quite a
Yeah.
bit, depending on where you put it in that right of way.
Yeah.
So the base of the trail could even be taller than the 6-foot
It
fence
might
to
be.
start with anyway.
It might be
Which is all kind of mute at
Beneficial,
that
very
point for vision,
beneficial.
because you're higher.
beneficial.
So,
Okay,
John, do
what
you
else
have
we
that
got,
for the
John?
fence? What do you think?
No, I think we just go with no more than 50% side
It's
obscuring
obscuring.
fence.
I think that's
And,
good.
Give you full design.
And then leave you
agree
alone.
With that. And
Right with that, Hillary, we're right with that?
Yes, we're good with that one.
last thought, I'm just throwing a little wrinkle. You said, you gave me a vision of how the person here that talked about their kid, and they're still gonna be able to come back to this place and go to the river's edge and play down there, right? So in those 260-foot parcels or whatever, whether they're here, whether they're there, I'd like some notion that we enhance that edge of the water. What is that, a little beach, or what would you do if we didn't have a condition?
If you, the Department of Lands has jurisdiction at the summer pool level. The City of Coeur d'Alene does not have jurisdiction at that summer pool level. And so whatever is done to stabilize that bank at that pool line has to be permitted through Department of Lands. So regardless of what, not to take anything from the commission, but we have to comply with the Department of Lands on that. And then also, Hillary, I think that there is part of the shoreline ordinance, within the 40 feet, there's a no work. We can't grade it, and Todd Whipple addressed that we're not gonna go down to the water line and pull all the dirt out and all the vegetation out. We didn't ask to do that. We said we were gonna prepare the building pads at 40 feet back. So if you want to grant me the ability to pull that bank back, we're not asking for that, but we can pull the bank back. But there's gonna have to be some type of bank stabilization on that, because you have high water level in the spring, as we all know. And if you don't put some type of stabilization on it, it's gonna erode down the river, and Department of Lands is not gonna be happy about that. So that's kind of a condition that works along with the Department of Lands.
Or it'd be similar to NIC Beach, where there's just your grass and you're sitting and along the river. If, you don't do any real stabilization in that section.
Well, or in Mill River, if you look at we had the aerial photo of Mill River.
Right,
Grass, bank.
right.
Riprap rock along the waterfront. The negative with that is, everyone wants, personally, the river's for the kids.
Yeah, you
And
can't walk
you wanna
on
see the
it.
kids down playing in the water.
Right.
This is not access friendly
Yeah.
at all for anybody. It's kind of an ankle breaker. But that's one way, that's the way that they addressed it.
Okay.
But they must have done something further down at the park, because you're down on a grass bank, dropping in down about 4 feet, and then you're on walkable.
I believe they haul sand
River
in there
water.
pretty regularly in the,
Kind
after
of
the high,
mucky. It's kind
high
of
water.
mucky, but yeah, you can walk on that, so. Are we ready?
Yeah, they're looking at me. Thank
closing?
you. We
Yeah,
gotta close.
I have
it's
to
you or
close
me.
it.
Thank
Go
you.
for
Are
it.
we good with
I
Lance?
think we close now.
Let him go? Okay, I'm gonna close
it? We're good?
public testimony on this hearing and give it to John to make a motion.
John's been,
I'm gonna try my best.
You can do it, John.
So here we go. Motion would be for PUD 2-19, that this is a matter that's come before the Planning Commission on July 9th, 2019. A matter that's come present a person requesting approval of PUD 219, a request for planned unit development known as River's Edge. Applicant is River's Edge for a 22.32 acre parcel located at 3528 West Celtis Way. Motion would include the findings B1 through B7, statements of fact in our worksheet. As for finding B8, that the proposal is in conformance with the comp plan, and that we adopt all of the objectives that are formatted into our worksheet. And I would point out that special emphasis on environmental quality, waterfront development, open space, pedestrian and bicycle environment, connectivity are items that we particularly addressed. B8B, that the design, we make the finding that the design and the planning for the site is compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses for adjacent properties, and that's based largely on the staff report, as well as the applicant's presentation of how this fits into surrounding similar developed properties. B8C, that we adopt a finding that the proposal is compatible with the natural features of the site, that it fits with the topography and the vegetation and the protection of streams and water areas and shoreline ordinance. B8D, that the motion includes the finding that the location, design, and the size of the proposal are such that the development will be adequately served by existing streets, public facilities, and services. And that's been addressed both in Mike's staff report as well as the developer's presentation, that water, sewer, street system, all of those things have been addressed and are supportable. B8E, that the motion includes a finding that the proposal does provide adequate open space exceeding 10% of the gross land area. That the motion include a finding that B8F, that the required off-street parking is provided, and that is as provided in testimony both by staff report as well as the applicant. That we include finding B8G, that the proposal does provide for an adequate method of perpetual maintenance, and that's in the staff report as well as the applicant's testimony. And that we would include, I'm not going to read them tonight, the 14 conditions that are in the staff report, with number 4 being amended to read such that the developer will provide the standpipe for future anticipated dock construction. And we would add new findings, conditions rather. First, the first added one would be that the city and the applicant will explore a preferred open space plan that locates the open space parcels to the east and west ends of the R12 property. Next added condition would be that the vehicular gates would be moved to the north edge of the R12 property. And the last one would be that the the next one would be that the applicant working with the city would explore an alternate location of the trail to the alternate location, words to that effect, clean that up a little bit. And the final added condition would be that any barrier fence along the trail would be 50% side obscuring.
No more than.
No
Not to
more than,
exceed.
thank you, no
Not to
more than
exceed.
50% side obscuring. If you want to make it 60, or no, 40, that would be fine.
Not to exceed.
Hey,
John.
Hold on, John.
John.
Hillary's got.
John, we
There's
just wanted to clarify. a few
and/or,
things.
we should probably add and/or on the east. You said east and west, it should be east and/or west, I believe.
Because it might be
Yes.
all at one end.
Yes.
All be at one.
Thank you, I meant to say
Right.
that. He mind read me, I meant to say that, thank you.
Just helping you.
Go ahead, Hillary.
So that was one of the ones we were going to clarify. The other one was for the fence or wall location, I would say along the property boundary versus
North
adjacent to the
boundary
trail, because we
of
don't know where the trail will
yeah,
be.
There again, that's what I meant to say, thank you. So, with
Go ahead,
that,
Hillary.
One more, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. Did you also want to clarify the public access easement to grant the access? City's property, I know it was in the narrative, but you had talked about that related to the gate.
yeah, I think incorporated with the movement of the gate condition is that I had said applicant would preserve public access easement for the city's 3.6 acre tract. Thank you for reading my mind there. So with that, the Planning Commission pursuant to the aforementioned finds for approval of River's Edge planned unit development as described should be approved.
And are we making this motion just for the PUD, and then we have to make another one, okay?
I'll second that motion.
I have a first and a second on the PUD. Roll call, Shannon?
Fleming?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
Lutrip?
No.
Mandel?
Yes.
Rumpler?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Okay, PUD passes. Next, John?
So this one's really straightforward because I think this one really just flows from the other one, and this would be the subdivision that's really embodied in the PUD, so I don't think we'll have much difficulty here. So subdivision 2-19 is a matter that's come before Planning Commission July 9th, 2019. And there being present a person requesting approval of S219, a request for a 29-lot preliminary plat known as River's Edge. Applicant is River's Edge for 22.23 acres located at 3528 West Saltus Way. Motion would be that we adopt findings B1 through B7 as statements of fact in our staff report, and we make the finding B7A that all the preliminary plat requirements have been met as determined by the city engineer, and that's based on the city engineer's statement of fact in the staff report that all the conditions have been met. B7B, that the provisions for sidewalks, streets, alleys, rights-of-way, easements, street lighting, fire protection, planting, drainage, pedestrians and bicycle facilities and utilities are adequate, and that's based on Mike Beharry's presentation and staff report statements. B7C, that the proposed preliminary plat does comply with all of the subdivision design standards and all of the subdivision improvement standards, there again based on Mike's presentation and statements in the staff report. B7D, that the lots proposed in the preliminary plat do meet the requirements of the applicable zoning district. Once again, that's statements that have been made by staff as well as documented in the staff report that all the conditions have been met for minimum lot size, street frontage and such, and density. So with that, the Planning Commission, pursuant to the aforementioned, would find that the request for River's Edge for preliminary plat approval as described in the application should be approved with the adoption of the same special conditions that we would mirror over from what we have in the PUD.
Okay, I have a first.
Second?
I have a second. Roll call, Shannon?
Fleming?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
Lutrip?
No.
Mandel?
Yes.
Rumpler?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Okay, S2-19 passes. Congratulations, and I thank you for your patience and working with the city through many, many, many hours of this hearing. Thank you.
I move to adjourn.
9:01, I second
What?
it. At 9:01, I second it.
Oh,
9:01, you seconded?
our cookie bet. I have a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much.